from Commissioner Peter O'Brien. Please rise.
Let us in. Let us bow our heads. Father, we thank you. We come to you as humbly as we know how, Father. We thank you for our commission. I thank you for my boss. I thank you for every person in leadership in Indian River County, God. We ask now that you give us an understanding, God. For we got a task that is on our shoulders, God, and we're going to need you to get us through these tough and trying times. But when it's over, God, we ask that you bless us and continue to keep us on your path, God. We'll be ever so careful to give you the praise. Let us say amen.
Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, gentlemen. First item is additions and deletions to the agenda. I've got one change I'd like to make, if it's all right. I would like to reverse the order of the two public hearings, 10A1 and 10A2. And this is because the 10A2 is a discussion on redistricting, and Representative Mayfield would like to speak, but she has another matter she has to attend to and doesn't want to leave in the middle of it. Do we have any other additions or deletions? There being none, we have a motion from Commissioner Wheeler, second from Commissioner Flesher. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0. Thank you. Next up, we've got a proclamation, the presentation of a proclamation designating July 2011 as Marine Debris Removal Month in Indian River County. This will be presented to Captain Don Voss, and it will be presented by Commissioner Wesley Davis. Is Captain Voss here?
Good morning, Captain.
Good morning. How are you?
Now I understand why you were one of the first ones here this morning.
That's right.
Welcome. This is a proclamation designating July 2011 as Marine Debris Removal Month in Indian River County. Whereas Marine Cleanup Initiative, Inc., the Operations Director, the Board of Directors, the Advisory Board, and the hundreds of volunteer divers and boat captains have worked for 10 years to remove marine debris such as monofilament fishing line, casting nets, cargo nets, batteries, anchors, chains, rope, bottles, cans, fishing gear from our lagoon, estuary, and inlets. Whereas these efforts are accomplished by divers using their own time, their own equipment, and risking their own lives to provide these needed public services to protect our most important natural resource. And whereas marine debris removal saves thousands of birds, fish, turtles, and other aquatic life from certain death through the elimination of all waste, including ghost fishing items such as abandoned traps and nets. And whereas Marine Cleanup Initiatives has spoken to thousands of school children, set up displays at hundreds of venues, and spent countless hours informing and creating public awareness for the proper disposal of these issues. And whereas these efforts are made possible from the support of state and local government agencies, donations of local dive shops, marinas, partnerships with Florida's Wildlife and Marine Services, and local environmentalist and research institutes. And whereas Marine Cleanup Initiative, Inc. has established the premier program and pilot project for coastal America for marine debris removal and established the first recognized training curriculum for marine debris removal and habitat restoration. And whereas this July, Marine Cleanup Initiative, Inc. and its volunteers will remove the 200,000th pound of marine debris from our waterways. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida, that July 2011 be designated as Marine Debris Removal Month, and encourage all citizens and businesses to participate in activities which will assist in the elimination of hazardous debris in our waterways through best practices of disposal, adopted this 12th day of July 2011, signed by all 5 county commissioners.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Say a few words, please.
By the end of this year, we'll actually reach 300,000 pounds. We're thrilled to be recognized by this commission today. I'm just the person that picks up the paperwork. It's all my divers, the 400 volunteers that go into the water to remove this stuff. We appreciate the opportunity to do a public service, although please don't tell my divers we're doing a public service. They think they're getting to go out there and have a lot of fun and touch nature.
That's great. Well, thank you very much for all you do. Yes, sir.
Captain, is there a phone number or website where people get more information or to volunteer? And
Yes, sir. You can go on our website, which is marinecleanupinitiativeinc.org, and we post on there the dates of all of our cleanups. Our annual cleanup in Fort Pierce is this Saturday. Sebastian Inlet is next Saturday. And otherwise, about 200 days a year, we're in the water cleaning the river all the way down to Martin County.
Very good. You know, I know Commissioner Davis frequents the Sebastian Sandbar up there. Are you making sure he cleans up after himself?
I definitely do. But now I got to admit, I have lost some lead at the inlet. So yeah, I'm guilty of that, but not on purpose, I can assure you.
Our dive shops go in the water and get that lead and melt it down and make new weights out of it.
And sell it back to me. There's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing like that.
Well, thank you. Come on up, Captain. Thank you. Nice tooth. Great job.
Makes it down 50 million years old.
Wow, it's quite old.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
We now move to the minutes. Any comments on the minutes of June 14th approval?
The June 14th, 2011 minutes.
A motion from Commissioner O'Brien, second from Commissioner Fleischer. All in favor? Aye. Passes 5-0. On to the consent agenda. Would anybody like anything pulled from the consent agenda?
Move approval.
Is that a motion to approve from Commissioner Fleischer?
Second.
Second from Commissioner O'Brien. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Passes 5-0. We now move on to public hearings, and we moved item 2 up above item 1, so we will now have the County Commission District's proposed 2011 redistricting plan discussed. And I'll let Mr. Plotwich open up the discussion.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. In 2010, the beginning of 2011, the United States Census Bureau undertook and completed the decennial census. That has significance for us because under the Florida Constitution, there is a provision stating that after each decennial census, the Board of County Commissioners shall divide the county into districts of contiguous territory as nearly equal in population as practicable. That constitutional provision is further implemented by a statutory provision, which also says that there shall be 5 county commissioners districts. There shall be 5 county commissioners districts in each county, which shall be numbered 1 to 5 inclusive, and shall be as nearly equal in proportion to population as possible. We have undertaken the beginning of that process. You will recall back on June 21, there was a discussion here at the board level. The board adopted a schedule, and the first item on that schedule is a public hearing today to receive public input and possibly to adopt a redistricting plan. We have worked with the supervisor of elections and the school board and others and come up with a proposed redistricting plan, which is in your package starting at page 56. The purpose of the plan is really twofold. Number one, to set forth criteria that staff will use in trying to reconfigure the districts. And number two really is an informational document for the public so they will be aware of the process, the criteria, and the schedule that has been adopted. I did have your proposed plan in front of this commission back on June 21. There have been some changes to that proposed plan since that time, and we'll probably discuss them as we go forward, but generally speaking, we narrowed the deviation between the largest district and the smallest district. We previously discussed that it would be about 10% from the ideal population. We narrowed that down to a 6% spread from lowest to largest. We also removed, at the request of the school board, a criteria that the district shall try to follow school boundaries. The school board had a workshop at which we appeared and basically told us that was not significant to them. So we've taken that out. We do have a criteria that municipalities shall be included within a single district rather than split among 2 or more districts. I've heard indirectly some feedback on that item, and I assume we'll have some discussion on that today. The schedule is part of the plan. I may have misunderstood at the June 21 meeting. I was thinking that you wanted 3 public hearings, including 1 in Sebastian, but after we went back to the tape, it appeared that you actually wanted 4 public hearings. So the current schedule calls for 4 public hearings. As I say, this is the first one, so I suggest that we have the public hearing, take public input, and eventually decide if you wish to adopt that redistricting plan.
Gentlemen, any questions for the attorney?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that Council just pointed out the major criteria, and I understand that the more criteria that have to be met, the more difficult the task will be in defining the districts. And noticed at item number 5 is neighborhoods and communities of interest shall include within a single district. I believe you're referring to municipalities in that bullet point. And I don't believe that that is an attainable goal, as the population in the north end of the county has not been evenly distributed amongst the 2 districts that are currently serving that municipality, specifically Sebastian. So I think that might be a bit of a challenge, as I believe that Commissioner Davis and I basically split that in a dividing line. And I believe that the population has not grown, although it's the largest growing municipality. I believe that it may not be an attainable goal.
Probably I'd point out 2 things. The first is, as it says at the criteria, to the extent reasonably possible, these criteria shall be accommodated. So nothing is mandatory in any of this. It is just an attempt to balance all of these factors to arrive at something. And the bottom line really is the only constitutional requirements are that the districts be contiguous and they be as nearly equal in population as practicable. The other criteria that we have here are really criteria that I think counties have historically followed in trying to balance multiple factors to come up with districts that made sense. Now, I'd also point out, it probably just needs to be said, that these districts are not like your federal districts or your state districts, as you all know. When you have federal or state districts, the representatives from those districts are elected by the residents or the voters within that district. So there's a significance to those district boundaries. In our situation, each of you is elected at large by all county voters. So you're not elected solely by the voters within your district. And that gives the whole process a little bit different.
Little attitude. Thank you, Council.
And actually, Chairman, responding to this, I'd just like to point out that actually the municipalities is under number 7. The communities of interest is under number 5. And I think that's important to keep because, especially with District 1, you get those problems with driveways and roads. And it's much better to keep them all in one district so we don't have neighbors in 2 districts fighting. And I think that's more the import of number 5.
I am the dirt road specialist. Thank
yes,
you.
and we want to keep it that way.
Commissioner Davis has been benevolent in sharing those opportunities.
Yeah, that's just because they're so large and profuse. However, it's good to keep them all under his purview, I think. Commissioner Wheeler, do you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I kind of said this before, but I think we're making a big deal out of something that's not such a big deal. I think as long as they're contiguous and the populations are fairly equal, that's all that's important. As County Attorney just pointed out, we're not elected by district, we're elected at large. And I don't know how many times that I've had to explain to people over the years, over and over and over and over again, the only criteria as far as the district goes is whoever's running has to live in it, period. And I know myself and all of you get calls from all over the county. You handle those complaints and you work with them. So I think we're taking something that's very simple and making it difficult.
Well, actually, I think what Mr. Polakowicz has done is actually fairly clear and easy, so I wouldn't say it's difficult, and I think that this has to be a very open and transparent process. The minute we don't take it seriously, we're going to get complaints from somebody.
The law says contiguous and
I understand. There's a lot of things about the law, but some things like this aren't always all about the law. It's about how people perceive things and the equities involved. So I'd like to congratulate Mr. Polakowicz for getting this off to a good start, and if there are no other comments, Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman, before you open the public hearing, just so that people know, too, one of the other things the board decided was that we're going to base this on total population numbers, and the census breaks it down. You could have political party affiliations or race or ethnic background, and the board decided we're just taking a look at the total number of heads, and that's the only factor we're considering. So, again, this doesn't affect political races or anything like that. It's strictly just the number of heads within a census district. Last night I hosted a community meeting, and Will Rice, our GIS coordinator, was there. And one of the questions came up kind of debating the census figures, and the answer is, folks, we got to go by the numbers of what they are. Now, whether you say there's more foreclosed homes in my neighborhood now than before, we can't deal with that. We have to deal with the numbers we're given. And Will's done a great job of plugging those numbers in and has some good maps we can look at. But I agree with Commissioner Will. I think this would be relatively simple. There's some good logical places to move lines that I think fall into all these different criteria. So I think it'll be a interesting but relatively straightforward process going forward. But anyway, that was it.
Any other comments? I'll now open the public hearing and ask if anybody would like to speak. I'll ask Representative Mayfield if she'd like to begin. You had some comments, I thought?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, I just wanted to come and brief you guys on our state hearing. As Mr. Polakowicz said, your district design and drawing is totally different than what ours is going to be. Ours is going to be a lot more complex than what the county and the school boards are going to be. And because of that, we are going to have 30 public hearings throughout the state. We've already started those hearings up in Pensacola, and we will complete them all the way down to Key West. And our first public hearing that's going to be in our geographic area is going to be July 28th at Vieira at the government complex, and that meeting will start at 10 o'clock. The second meeting will be held August 15th in Stewart at the Blake Library, and that meeting will start at 6 o'clock. The purpose of these public hearings really is to get input. There will not be any debates of what people think is correct or not correct. It's just really a listening process for the representatives that are sitting on these committees. We have split the committees up into three. Actually, there's 4 committees. We have a congressional committee that will do nothing but focus on the congressional seats and the redistricting. We have a House committee that will focus on nothing but the House redistricting. And then we have a Senate committee that will focus on just the Senate redistricting. And the makeup of those committees are the House members. Then we have we call the big committee, the committee and subcommittees. The big committee is a makeup of various people from those subcommittees. Now, one of the rules that we have to follow is the fact that we do have to keep light communities. We have to keep geographic areas, and it has to be natural boundaries is what we're looking for. We want to get away from the snake boundaries where you have people representatives that are representing, 3 or 4 counties because they've drawn them for various reasons. Indian River County has a population of about 138,000. We have right now with the new census, the House members should have 156,000 is the number of members that we should have in our district. The congressional seat should have 696,000, and the state senate should have 470,000, and that's how the new districts will be drawn. Our leader, Speaker Designate Will Weatherford, who is leading the charge on this, has made it perfectly clear this will be the most open and transparent process that this state has ever seen whenever it comes to redrawing these boundaries. There's a few things that we will not do. We are not going to be drawing districts to favor any particular party. We will not be drawing districts to disfavor any particular party, and we will not be drawing districts to keep current incumbents in office. South Florida will be losing, they're one of the ones that has lost population, so the movement is going to be coming north. So there will be members that are currently sitting members in the Miami and South Florida area that may not live in their district anymore when the districts are drawn. Therefore, they will have to make a decision to move into that new district. So I really wanted to kind of chat a little bit about what we talked about, how we think our district should look like. I've met with the Chamber of Commerce, and one of the ideas that we've come to is maybe keep all of Indian River, since 138,000 population, to keep all of Indian River, and then the difference that we need is roughly over 8,000. Split that up between some of St. Lucie County and some of Brevard County. So whoever the representative is in Indian River County is part of the delegation in Brevard County and part of the delegation in St. Lucie County, which actually gives you quite a bit of support on issues that you want in your particular district. So that's just an idea that we've kind of talked about, and in these public meetings, what I would highly recommend and suggest, if anyone's interested, is to make sure that they make a point to do that. We're meeting tomorrow again with the Chamber of Commerce to talk a little bit about and hash out a little bit about what the Chamber may want to take a position on, or what the residents in our county may want to take a position on. And anyone that has any comments or questions or wants to know more about it, they are more than welcome to call our office, and we will give them more information. There is a website that is mybuilder.gov, I believe is the name of it, where you can actually go to the website and look at how the districts currently are and how the districts, the breakdown on what it needs to be as far as population per per the new census. So that's really all I wanted to talk about. I'll be happy to answer any questions from any of the commissioners if they have any.
Just Representative Mayfield, I guess from the county's point of view, you're suggesting all of Indian River, then a couple small parcels in the other two counties would give us, one voice representing Indian River County. If, just for example, say we split the county in half, then we would have two voices in Tallahassee. Is that not more to our benefit to have two voices speaking for Indian River County than just one?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Again, that's...
Yeah, boy, that was respectful. Man, we haven't done that in a long time.
Sorry.
No, that was breath of fresh air.
That's what we do. That could be discussed if you want to have it too. I think when you have a whole, because it's just like Commissioner Wheeler had indicated, you're voted at large in the county, and when you have constituents call, it doesn't matter where they live. Well, we actually do the same thing in our district. In our office, we have a lot of calls from people from District 29. We don't ask where they're from. We don't say what district you're on. We don't say what party you're affiliated with. We take care of the residents, and because Indian River County is a small, relatively, we're a small county, 138,000 people, that's less than what a district is that's being, asked to be drawn. So I don't necessarily know that you have more representation in there, because the idea is if you take St. Lucie County and you're part of that district, and you have two House members there, so that makes you 3, and you have 3 senators there. So you're part of the delegation. So when you want something done, you really go to your delegation and say, I need your help on this. This is real important to my community. And so I have 5 or 6 people that's helping me get an issue resolved in my community, because I know how important it is to the member of that district. The same way in Brevard County. We have 6 other members up in Brevard County, and whenever they have issues, they go to all the delegates within their delegation and say, we need your help on this issue. Can you help us? So, you could argue it either way. Is it good to have 2 people up there representing your district for 138,000 people, or is it better if you have one person and then you're split up between 2 counties, one above you, one below you, so you actually have 12 people that you could pull upon and say, look, this is real important to my people in my district, and I need your help on this. So you have, 12 people going versus just 2 people going. So, but you could argue it either way. The idea is to keep it compact so people are represented in like communities. But again, that's, it's not my decision to make. It's really going to be the voice of the people and how the committees all shake out. Okay. But I can tell you, they're not drawing districts to favor any particular member. And they're not drawing districts because somebody wants to run in that area and they're currently not elected. They will be drawn more openly, transparent, and a lot of input this process because of the technology that we have. And if I may, I'll continue on that process. We start committee weeks in September this year because we have to start session in January this year because of the redistricting. We have to know what those districts are by the 1st of June so people can file to run in their districts. And so that process will start much earlier this year than in the past. And once those committee meetings start, that's where the members of those 4 committees that I spoke about will have public testimony as well on those specific issues on where they've drawn the lines, so people can come in and say, well, we agree or we disagree or we don't like this, we don't like that. Because once we have the districts drawn and we've passed it on both the House and the Senate, which I think they're anticipating that to be done by the 1st of March, the middle of March. So then it has to go to the Attorney General for approval, and then it has to go to the courts. And so we've got to make sure we allow enough time, because we're sure it's going to be challenged. It's always challenged, time to get through the courts so that we can have the districts ready for people to file for in June.
And Representative Naples, you brought up a challenge, and not to put you on the spot, but earlier there was a lawsuit filed in opposition of the constitutional amendments that favored more of a balanced redistricting. Is that lawsuit still active, or has that been dropped?
I believe that lawsuit's still active.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for the representative? Any other comments you'd like to make? Well, thank you very much for coming today.
Thanks.
Always enjoy having our representative here. Anybody else from the public would like to speak? Good morning.
Good morning.
And we're always happy to have the leadership from Sebastian down in our
Good morning, Chairman Solari, Commissioners. Richard Gilmore, City of Sebastian, City Council. And I'd like to address you today about the issue of redistricting. As we know from the latest census data that our county's population is moving north and moving west. And that's why you're tasked with redrawing and reconstituting your individual districts. District 1 is the largest at 32,000 right now. Commissioner Flesher, you're right at 30,000. I think contrasting to these 2 districts in the north, District 3, Gary Wheeler is at 25,000 roughly, and Chairman Solari, your district is, I believe, at 20,700, if I'm not mistaken, thereabouts, give or take 1 or 2. I don't want to leave anybody out. Okay. Both Commissioner Davis and Commissioner Flesher will have to give up territory or give up population, and as will, of course, Mr. O'Brien. Commissioner O'Brien, you'll have to give up some of your population as well to balance everything out. Dividing the county population of 138,028 by 5 gives us an average of 27,600 in each newly formed district. So both districts in the north will have to give up or transfer some territory to District 3 and District 5 if you're going to balance things. But how do you draw the lines? The devil really is in the details, isn't it? My constituents in Sebastian are well served by both Commissioner Flesher and Commissioner Davis. And my reason for being here is the item number 7 on the criteria for redistricting, and that's that each district or each city would only be served by 1 commissioner. I believe we'd have a problem with that. So under the current situation, Commissioner Flesher has the southern half of Sebastian. Commissioner Davis, you represent the kind of the northern half of the city. And under Mr. Polakwich's plan, we would lose half of our representation. Commissioner Flesher's district would really mainly consist of just the city of Sebastian. And this solution, I feel, is not fair or balanced. So historically, Vero Beach has enjoyed having 3 commissioners whose districts overlap the city boundaries of Vero. Right now, District 3, District 5, and a small part of District 2 overlap the city boundaries of Vero Beach. And if you look at the future, and I believe we should look at the future, how things are going to progress in the next 10-year period before the next census, Vero's southern boundary abuts to Commissioner O'Brien's district. And so if they would expand or annex any property in the future in the next 10 years, they would all of a sudden have 4 county commissioners that are representing parts of Vero Beach. So in the future, we're concerned with redrawing the lines, and we're also concerned with Vero. If the lines are redrawn and they only have one commissioner, that's going to take away a little of the cloud of that city as well. I believe, too, that trying to redraw, especially the lines around Vero Beach, is going to be a Gordian knot of a solution. And so I don't think that's going to happen. And I understand the point that county commissioners are elected at large and serve everyone's need here in the county. And you do a very good job of it, commissioners. But if all our good folks in Sebastian have an issue, they're not, trust me, going to call a commissioner who's 20 miles away. They're not going to do it.
Yeah, they do.
I feel that drawing a line around any municipality and saying you're only going to have one commissioner is prejudicial. It marginalizes that municipality. And as a county, as a city councilman in Sebastian, I don't really want to see our city marginalized. So how could that really affect your city, you may ask? Good question. But let's just go back a few years to February meeting, February 11th, 2009, back to an MPO meeting where all 5 county commissioners hold a seat. It was my first meeting there, and I was nervous almost as nervous as I am right now. And I'd been called as an alternate to sit on the MPO in lieu of Jim Hill, who was the regular member. When the first action came up, it was to prioritize which road was most in need of repaving in our county for TARP funds. And Chairman O'Brien, you asked me which road I thought needed repair most. And I said, well, it has to be Barber. Barber is in terrible shape. And the reason I said that is because the year before I had walked the street and saw the huge gaping potholes and the deep cracks in the pavement. And I remember wondering at the time, if I'm fortunate enough to be elected, how in the world are we going to have enough funds in Sebastian to pay for fixing this road? So what happened at that meeting is both Commissioner Davis and Commissioner Flesher supported me and said, yes, Barber's the worst road. In fact, I think it was you, Commissioner O'Brien, that said, well, we ought to move it up the list. And I believe it was Commissioner Flesher who said, let's move it up to number 1. There was a councilman from one of the other cities, Councilman Becker, who made the motion, and I seconded it. And we ended up having Barber number 1. And now the city of Sebastian, 2 years later and $2 million later, has a smooth road for the residents to run on for probably decades to come. Now, would the results have been different had we only had one representative? I hope that they wouldn't be, but I don't want to put Sebastian in that position, and that's why I'm here. Redistricting can be fair and balanced. There's an old saying, and you've heard it 1,000 times, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And so what I'm saying here is that just by shrinking some of our districts a little bit, massaging them, we could move District 2 up to, say, 512 and out to 510, gaining some population there. District 2 could give some island territory over to District 5 and balance that equation out. You could take a little bit from District 4 and move it into District 3. And really, doing it the smaller way, I think would be fairer for everybody. And at the end of the day, when all the dust settles, people would not have to wake up and wonder, gee, well, who am I represented by now? You know, there wouldn't be a huge change. District maps would look pretty much the same as they do now. In conclusion, I realize that this is just the first of several. I hear now 3 more public hearings will be held on this matter. And I also realize that the solutions I'm advancing may at first seem simplistic. And I also am aware that there are a lot of things that you all must consider before you come up with a final plan for the county. But one thing I'm dead sure of, and that is whatever plan you finally agree on, it must be fair and it must be balanced. Whether that group, it must not marginalize any group of people, whether that group of people lives in the country, whether that group of people lives on the mainland, on the barrier island, or whether that group of people lives in the city of Sebastian. Thank you for your attention.
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Councilman.
Councilman Gilmore, two things. One is, last night, looking at the map that Will provided of my district, I realized that there's about 4 homes that are within the city of Vero Beach limits that actually dip down into my district. So they've already got representation from 4 commissioners, for whatever that's worth. Secondly, the September 20th public hearing is, you all are graciously going to host us up in Sebastian. And I would love to have your council help spread the word, and I'd love to see a packed house up there so that we can get good representation and hear from all the folks in North County, particularly about the points you brought up about the city of Sebastian and the representation there. So we hope you all can draw a big crowd, because we'd love to hear from everybody up there in Sebastian.
Count on it.
Okay,
We'll
great.
do it.
Thank you.
I'd like to make one other point on this. I mean, one of the reasons for having some of these guidelines is not because they matter to us here. I'm with Commissioner Wheeler on that. I don't think any of us can compare or are concerned with anything except not being drawn out of our seat. Aside from that, we don't care. But Will needs guidelines. And that's the reason for having public hearings, so that if we have a set of guidelines, it's good, just like you coming up here today, to, as early as possible in the process, see if some of these bullet points matter more or less than others. So I appreciate your comments today. They give us some direction. I think we'll take that into effect, and I think Will understands, or will understand by the first 2 public hearings. So that's all good. I don't want to impose on Mayor Kramer, but he's in the audience, and I'll ask if he sometime in the next couple months can discuss this with the city of Vero Beach. Again, I'm indifferent to whether I expand north, south, or to the west, but I think it's good to hear from as many people as possible, and if the city of Vero Beach wanted to weigh in on it, I think that would be excellent.
Okay.
So thank you very much for coming today. Anybody else from the public want to speak? Good morning. Name and address for the record, please.
Good morning. My name's Tom Hill. I live in Sebastian. I just wanted to urge you to give some thought to the agricultural lands in your county. Highly productive area, large number of problems we're facing right now. We really need representation that understands agriculture. So when you're drawing those lines, give some idea of having an area that would have a representative that understands the problems. That's all I ask.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'd just like to say, Tom, I would agree with that, but by the same token, I'd just like to reiterate, whoever you think has an interest in whatever your problem or interest may be, any one of the 5 of us up here are more than willing to work with you, whether you're in the district or out of the district. And it's always been like that, at least since I've lived in Indian River County. So I think the only difference between us and the city, and I don't think the city has districts. So the difference is, you know, and I think they've done it in the county on a statewide basis around it, because they don't want 5 commissioners living in one neighborhood.
Yeah.
And that's probably about it. I mean, I was very involved in some things in Sebastian over the years, and I've always been in the South County and vice versa. So, you know, I understand what everybody's saying, what their concerns are. It's just that, as all of us have said, you know, we're at the beck and call of any citizen of this county. Whether they're a voter, a non-voter, Democrat, Republican, makes no difference.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, ma'am. Name and address for the record, please.
Ruth Sullivan, 1215 Indian River Drive, Sebastian. As you can see, there are 2 former mayors here that are not happy with having our representatives reduced from 2 to 1. And to think that is not important, because I know all of you are sensitive to the entire population, but I was in politics for years in Michigan, many years. You're in politics, you run for election, and we know realistically that you have to satisfy your voters directly. And primaries mean you have to satisfy the people who are in your district. And so that makes them more sensitive to that district. This is a realistic situation. You're all smart enough to know this. You've been there many years, as I was for many years. And so we don't want to lose 2 representatives and go down to 1 representative. We know that our people who are elected from our district and the primaries are more sensitive to the problems in that particular area than people who are at large. And I love you all at large, but I want my representatives, and I want them to be 2. Quite frankly, the way we're growing, maybe we should have more. But I'll settle for the 2 right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public? There being none, I'll close the public hearing, reminding everybody that we'll have 2 or 3 more public hearings and probably a workshop or 2 in the future. Any last comments from the commissioners?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think just to give Will some direction, because between now and September, he's going to have to try to put together a few drafts of where we would like to see. And I'm kind of the occurrence with the idea that we don't want to split municipalities. So I'd go ahead and make a motion that we either delete bullet point 7, which talks about municipalities in a single district, or actually that'd probably be my preference. Let's just delete that and move forward with the others as they are.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner O'Brien going ahead with the memo but deleting number 7, which was seconded by Commissioner Flesher. Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, I'd just point out that the reason why 7's in there is simply because it's kind of a traditional factor that you see in these plans. I have no problem whatsoever in deleting it, so it does not create a problem from our side. Commissioner Wheeler.
And I'd just like to comment, too. My comments here weren't directed at trying to keep that or not keep that. It was just to let the public know how we function, so there's not a misunderstanding. So I don't have a big problem where the districts are drawn as long as they're drawn equally and under the law.
Great. Commissioner Fletcher?
Addresses my concern. Thank you.
Commissioner Davis?
About the only thing that I'm in favor of what you're talking about. The only thing that I think would really be nice is if we could get, and I guess it's kind of in there. For example, I know exactly where my north boundary is, my west boundary, my south boundary. And when you start going to the east side of it, it starts to get a little bit of, well, looks like a malaria worm. And then whenever I'd like to try to see it crisp, because people ask, where's your district? And in fact, I've actually had, back when in other races, people jump into the race thinking they're in the district, and when they wind up finding out later on they're not. And just to avoid that, if
how you got elected?
I'll take it any way I can get it. But just to look at it, I see that other boundaries are pretty crisp. And if there's a way of crisping that up a little bit so that I can say, okay, not that it matters, but if you're on the east side of this or the west side of that or the north side of this or south side of that, that would be nice.
I have a benefit. I have the ocean.
Yeah, I know it. And I guess you want to move east a little bit, right?
I'm not concerned. Anybody else?
Put him in the water.
We have a motion from Commissioner O'Brien, a second from Commissioner Flesher. Thank you for the comment, Commissioner Flesher. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0.
I second that.
I thought so too, but you didn't speak up, but.
We'll move on to public hearings, revised pain management clinic ordinance, and again, Mr. Plakowicz.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, last summer this board adopted a pain management clinic moratorium ordinance that was scheduled to expire on June 8, 2011. In anticipation of the expiration of the moratorium, this board considered a permanent pain management clinic ordinance, and that ordinance went through the process of development and eventually came to this board for vote on May 17, 2011. Coincidentally, roughly 10 days prior to our vote on our permanent ordinance, the state legislature adopted some comprehensive legislation on May 6, 2011. As those different events happened, it was the decision of this board to go forward with its permanent ordinance, which was then adopted May 17, but with the idea that the permanent ordinance would have to in fact be revised to take into account the new state legislation that was adopted May 6. So we have now taken the May 17 ordinance, we have gone through it and updated it to be consistent with state law, and we're coming forward today for adoption of the revised ordinance based on those changes in state law. The primary changes that occurred were, number one, we redefined pain management clinic so that our definition would be consistent with the new definition in state law. We added a definition of chronic non-malignant pain because the state incorporated that into the definition of pain management clinics. The new state law adopted standards of care for physicians, so we added compliance with those standards of care as an activity required under our ordinance. And the new state law also added a series of standards for facilities relating to infection control, quality assurance, etc. We incorporated those standards into our ordinance and again made a violation of those standards a violation of the ordinance. We faced a policy issue which we brought before this board on June 14. The policy issue was that the state law requires registration of pain management clinics. However, it exempts from that registration requirement certain clinics which are wholly owned and operated by what I will call specialty physicians. And this, I brought to this board back on June 14, the question of should we exempt from our ordinance, from our permit requirement in our ordinance, those specialty clinics which are exempt from state registration. Excuse me, on June 14 we had 4 members present and there was a consensus not to exempt those specialty clinics from a county required permit. That led to the question of if they're going to require a permit, should we have an abbreviated application process for those specialty clinics? The 4 members present on June 14 split 2-2 on that question and decided simply to defer to today's hearing because we would now have 5 members present. So we have prepared the ordinance with these changes that I've mentioned. We have prepared it with an abbreviated application process for those physician specialty clinics. However, if it's the will of this board not to have an abbreviated application process, it's a very simple thing for us to delete those provisions out. So we're here today for a public hearing and final adoption of that revised ordinance.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Davis.
I know typically we would have the commission give their thoughts. We've kind of done that in the past. Did that at the last meeting with the exception of Commissioner Wheeler, but since then I've received an email, I believe everybody else has, from a business owner of a pharmacy up at the north end of the county. And she had some concerns, and I understand she's here this morning to speak on it. I'm not trying to turn the meeting over. What I'd like to do is go straight into the public hearing before I start to...
Well, that's it. I'll just check to see if any commissioners have a question for Mr. Black, which now, there being none. Open the public hearing. See if anybody wants to speak on this issue. Good morning. Your name and address for the record, please.
Good morning, Chairman Solari and Commissioners. My name is Teresa Toll. I'm pharmacist and owner of Bay Street Pharmacy, which is 7746 Bay Street, Sebastian. And I'm coming this morning to talk about a provision that I recently discovered in this ordinance that's already been adopted. And first of all, I would like to apologize to you for not coming in May when this was first proposed, but I wasn't aware of it. Based on the title of the ordinance, Pain Management Clinics and Controlled Substances, I didn't realize there was a regulation of pharmacies that was presented. And it was actually only recently when I received this revised ordinance via email that I discovered that this had passed. So since you're reconsidering or amending this ordinance this morning, I wanted to come forward and talk about my concerns. The second thing I'd like to say is that I do wear a second hat. I am chair of the Legislative Government Affairs Committee of the Sebastian Chamber, and I want to make sure I state that we've been very much on record in support of regulation of pill mills or pain clinics. I'm very supportive of your moratoriums in the past, supportive of our local communities passing moratoriums as well. So I just want to make sure that you understand my perspective, that I very much am in favor of doing what we can to control the problem that's on the streets. I did send an email to all of you, and thank you, Commissioner Davis, for allowing me to come forward this morning. I just want to raise some of my concerns. I also have recruited a couple of fellow pharmacy owners in the county to come today, so I believe at least one of them is going to get up and speak. But Greg DeCrescenzo from Perkins Indian River Pharmacy is also here, and Doug Miller, who owns Miller's Pharmacy and Osceola Pharmacy, are also here. Our concerns with Section 315.07, which talks about no more than 20% of prescriptions being filled at a pharmacy during a 30-day period of time, have to do with the fact that it's very difficult to regulate a number. And unfortunately, Representative Mayfield left, but she could stand here and tell you about the deliberations that occurred this year during House Bill 7095 at the state level. Actually, when that was proposed on the House side, there was a dispensing unit provision in there of 5,000 units. And that was hotly debated. But basically, we could dispense no more than 5,000 units of any controlled substance in 1 month. So at the state level, with all of the representatives and the senators, it was hotly debated, and finally, ultimately, it was removed from the language that passed. The reason that it was removed is because it's very difficult to determine what is the appropriate number for any pharmacy to dispense. So they did remove it with a provision to continue to study it. The remainder of the regulation that has passed, the ordinance that has passed at the county level, talks about there being one or more pharmacists on duty. All of that is state law. So that part, it's okay to restate, but it is already state law. We have to abide by it. Finally, I'd like to kind of go through what the provisions of House Bill 7095 are. I have a quick summary, just so you understand that in addition to the reporting requirements we already have, these are all of the new things that are going into effect for pharmacy. And many of these changes did go into effect July 1st, so they're already in place now. Reporting requirements, if we know of a patient who is presenting a prescription to us that's fraudulent, we have to report that to local law enforcement within 24 hours. So that is a new provision. We've never had to call local law enforcement before. Many times we do, but we've never had to do that in the past. Secondly, there's going to be a completely new permit process. Now, that is not in place yet, but at the state level, regardless of the fact that I already have a pharmacy permit by, I thought it was January, but I believe it's July of next year, I'm going to have to go through a background check and obtain an additional permit to dispense controlled substances in my pharmacy. And I will have to go through that every year. As far as purchases, we talked about dosage units, but our wholesalers have now also been charged with regulating what we purchase. So the wholesalers are who we buy our prescriptions from, and they are actually required to pay attention if a pharmacy purchases more than 5,000 dosage units. They are going to be part of that study, and they have to actually credential us, and they actually have to report to the DEA if there's any suspicion of activity, and then they have the ability to come in and document the reasons why. So if we service a hospice, or if we're next door to a teaching hospital, and I know you have a few carve-outs in your ordinance, but something along those lines, then the wholesalers have provisions, but they have reporting guidelines too. And I've actually had one of my wholesalers that stopped selling controlled substances to us altogether for a short period of time until they sent an inspector into my pharmacy to make sure that my business practices were good. I can tell you that I probably turn more of this business away than I take. We are very scrupulous in our review of patient prescriptions, and we actually have guidelines in place that we don't fill prescriptions from patients that are from out of the county or from patients that live outside of the county. If the doctors are out of the county or they live outside of the county, we're very cautious about that. We may make exceptions, but that's been a posted policy in our pharmacy for a long time. So I struggle with the 20% because I don't know where it came from. I don't know that we hit it, but I don't know that we wouldn't. At some particular month. And one thing I can think about is not related to controlled substances necessarily, but sometimes there's shortages in the marketplace where the chain pharmacies can't get a particular item, and I can get it in one day. Because of their buying practices, they can't get it the next day. And so many times I'll have a flood of people coming in for one particular item, and there was a blood pressure medicine last year that was that way, that you couldn't get anywhere in Sebastian except Bay Street Pharmacy. So those things could happen. Now, that would probably be outside the norm, but still that could possibly put me over your 20% mark. And am I going to have to keep track and turn a patient away because we've hit that mark? So I just wanted to make sure and go on record of saying that we're very concerned about this when it's more restrictive than the state level, and I don't understand the reason for that. And I'll be happy to take questions.
Sure. Thank you. Commissioner Wheeler.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Mr. Flakowicz, and also, how confusing, inconsistent is our ordinance with this aspect of it and the state's law? And I think she makes some good points. Sometimes, we sit here as bureaucrats or politicians and try to come up with numbers to make something work, and we don't have any practical experience, and we don't look at all the,
And let me just comment. First of all, thank you very much for coming. We've, throughout this process, tried to reach out to the medical community. And you're right, the pharmacy piece of this, as the process has evolved, we started focused on pain management clinics. And at some point in the process, fairly late in the process, we started to realize that as much as pain management clinics were a problem, in many cases, they acted in concert with pharmacies, and therefore we had a pharmacy problem that we were concerned about as well. But let me just give a little background on this. This whole world of pain management clinics has been an evolving process since we became involved. And it's been a constant game, I think, of cat and mouse between the regulators, or whether it be a county commission or city council or the state legislature, and the bad guys on the other side. And when the state legislature got involved in 2009, they did not address the pharmacy side at all. When they revised their legislation in 2010, again, they did not involve the pharmacies. In 2011, the legislation that passed in May 6, 2011, suddenly there is a lot in there about pharmacies, and there is a lot about wholesale distribution. None of that existed when we put this ordinance together. And where this particular provision came from, as communities started to realize that the pharmacy could be a major component of the problem, communities then tried to figure out, well, what can we do to try to control that? And again, keeping in mind that this world on the bad guy side is constantly evolving, trying to get around what we're designing. Some of the communities to the south, primarily Boynton Beach and Delray, came up with this provision. They went out and did an analysis went to the legitimate pharmacies and said, okay, what is a threshold that makes sense to you in terms of legitimate pharmacies would never exceed this threshold? And they came up with 15%. So Delray and Boynton Beach both adopted ordinances with a 15% provision in it. We worked, I won't say extensively, but fairly extensively with Boynton Beach to get their information. And in the end, we decided to come up with 20%. So we put 20% in the ordinance. We weren't sure, in all honesty, how efficiently we could enforce it. At the same time, given that this world was evolving and the bad guys moved left as we prohibited what was on the right and vice versa, we decided to put this in there. And it really is kind of a belts and suspenders approach. And I will say, as has just been said to us, when we came up with this, the state legislation didn't address pharmacies. Today, on May 6, 2011, we do have fairly extensive state regulation. So I don't see a big problem in pulling this out if that's the will of the board, because we now have, as I say, fairly strong state legislation, which we didn't have when this was put in place.
Commissioner Wheeler, you still...
when I look, if you're a large pharmacy, 20%, I would assume gives you much more volume. Where 5,000 is a number to work with based on commerce more than based on, if you're doing 10% of the volume, of a chain pharmacy, then, 20% is a big chunk of your business. And and I don't understand the pharmacy business at all. I just want to try and be fair with this. And on the surface, from what I'm hearing here, I think the number that the legislature has imposed may work more equally than the percentage basis.
May I reply?
Yes, ma'am.
First of all, the legislature hasn't imposed that number yet. They looked at it.
Okay.
They pulled it because they couldn't. They decided to study it for this year. They have the wholesalers watching and reporting to them and to the DEA if they see numbers greater than 5,000. The other problem was they had a very odd definition of dosage unit, and it depended on who you talked to. A dosage unit could be one tablet, or in some cases a dosage unit could be if a patient was taking 3 tablets a day, that was a dosage unit. So that kind of got a little crazy during legislative session. The other part that was really important that I left out is that that prescription drug monitoring program that was passed a couple years ago that went through a lawsuit is finally going into place September 1st. And I know that because, well, I've seen it reported, but I've also been contacted by the State Department of Health to be a beta store for that system. So my pharmacy is actually going to start testing that system July 28th. So that's yet another level that's there. It wasn't in 7095 because it had previously passed. What that means is that once a week I'm going to have to report to a database, and that database is going to be available to physicians, to pharmacies, and to law enforcement. So there will be another means to look at what's happening in any individual pharmacy based on that reporting. Now, obviously, I guess there's still some pharmacies that could choose not to report, but if they get caught, then they're going to have their licenses yanked. So just, again, another layer that's there that is a safety net that I just want to make you all aware of.
Commissioner Wheeler, any other questions?
No, I think that's...
Commissioner O'Brien?
Yeah, it looked like when we wrote this, we had put in some exemptions from the 20%, but most of those refer back to large national chains like a CVS or Walgreens pharmacy, and obviously the independent owned pharmacies fell through that crack. So I see the solution as one of two things. Either we can just delete the 20% in its entirety, or in our definitions we do describe a pharmacy as one that's regulated under Chapter 465 of Florida statutes, and maybe just add that into the exemptions. And I don't know which is a better way to go, but to me that'd be one of the two options. And that way you would fall under the exemption. Are you regulated under 465?
We all are.
Okay.
May I comment again?
Absolutely.
The other thing I don't see in here that was a concern to me, and I didn't start reviewing this until Friday last week, so I apologize for the late notice to you. I haven't contacted the hospitals, but it doesn't appear that the hospitals are exempted, so I thought that was perhaps a problem too. Now, I don't know where their percents are, but we're all regulated under 465. So, and as far as your definitions, Commissioner O'Brien, the definitions, I at first got very concerned about that too, because when 7095 started this year, I was very angry. Very angry, because independent pharmacies were carved out. The chain pharmacies actually, if you were a publicly held corporation, you could continue to dispense. But the independent pharmacies, if we hadn't been licensed 10 years or longer, then we were going to be cut out. Now, Bay Street Pharmacy's been in Sebastian for 27 years. My father-in-law opened Sebastian River Drugs in the 70s. Greg's Pharmacy was opened in 1971. I don't remember when Osceola was opened, but we represent well over 100 years of pharmacy in Indian River County. So it wasn't a concern to us, but still, why choose an arbitrary number? Fortunately, that got removed. But your definitions specifically refer to clinics and not to pharmacies, the way I read this. Mm-hmm. So, and there's no exemption for hospice in here. And so I don't know if Doug wants to get up and speak or not, but his pharmacy has the hospice contract. So I could see there being a potential problem there with him hitting that threshold because of hospice, and you don't reference it in your ordinance.
Okay. And would eliminating the 20% be the most logical cure? I agree 100%, with your points. I think y'all did fall kind of through, and we do need to address our local owned pharmacies. And obviously you all are not our problem, you're our, asset to the community. So what would be the solution to this?
Let me just quickly check one thing as we're, let's see. No, that's okay. We still have over in the prohibited activities section of the ordinance, dispensing of controlled substances in violation of applicable law would be a violation of the ordinance. That's actually a good thing because all of the new law that's come in now with respect to pharmacies is in effect incorporated through that provision. So getting to your specific question, Commissioner O'Brien, I think the easiest answer on page 50 of your board package, section 31507, would be just to delete that first sentence, the 20% sentence. I think the rest of the paragraph probably what we could do, delete that first sentence and then delete the proviso at the end. Because that proviso was an attempt to try to pick up some of, for example, a hospital-based pharmacy. You see, the proviso said the restriction shall not apply to a pharmacy which operates within or as an accessory to a facility described in 31502. Then you go over to 31502 and you pick up the hospital facilities license under Chapter 395. So that's what we were trying to do was exclude those types of pharmacies from the 20%.
Right.
So basically, it just said there has to be one or more pharmacists licensed by the state of Florida on duty at all times. The pharmacy is open.
It's redundant to state law.
Yeah. But that, frankly, I mean, parts of this are redundant to state law, and the idea is it gives us a local enforcement remedy, and we don't have to simply wait for the state.
Well, I guess after the public hearing, we can
Commissioner.
take action.
Well, that's really that's why at the last meeting, I wanted the abbreviated form, being in small business and understanding, at the surface, what's one more form for you to fill out and submit to government. But whenever you put it on top of everything else you have to do, your concerns are my concerns, and that is we want to crack down on the illegal use of and the abuse of this substance. And we all know I've got family members that have had issues with this, and so it's real, it hits home. But at the same time, I understand what you're going through, and this is just one of many. That doesn't include, and it's not just the simple form that you've got to fill out. It's the penalties and the fines and everything else that can go, you not being able to operate if you don't. And so I don't want to. I really still boil back down to I want as tough of ordinance that we can have that still allows legitimate dispensers to operate and still give our sheriff's department the tools they need to prevent abuse. And with that being, I mean, are we close to that? Are we too far from that?
I think the other thing that hasn't been stated, and I just want to make sure that I say this, is I referenced it in my email and briefly in my comments, is we don't want to turn the legitimate pain patient away either. I mean, we haven't really said that today, but I want to make sure I go on record of saying that. I mean, there are a lot of legitimate pain patients who need their medications, and honestly, with this provision in place, I mean, I'm going to have to be watching, do I go over that 20%, and at some point, do I have to make a decision, that next person that walks in the door, am I going to have to turn them away? I had a patient that was poised to come with me today, but she didn't want to speak. But I mean, she was the perfect case of somebody who needs the medications, who sees a pain management clinic in the Melbourne area, a very large pain management clinic, very reputable, and is on Class 2 narcotic prescriptions every month because there's a need. And she would have been the perfect person to come and speak. So I'll just speak on her behalf of saying, what if, and I've been her pharmacy for a long time, I've taken great care of her, and she would tell you we've gone above and beyond for her. But what if she walked in the door one day and I just said, Sandy, I'm sorry, but you're over my 20% for the month, so can you come back in August? Or, I don't know that scenario would come up, but I wanted to make sure and bring it up. So, yeah, you're right, Commissioner Davis. I think that, one more thing, but I just wanted you to be aware, you're absolutely right, that when this started, these layers weren't in place, but I wanted you all to be aware of all the different layers that have been added since you started this process. And deleting that provision or most of that, if you deleted the 20%, then I would be comfortable with that, because you're right. If you have the right to go back and enforce what's in state law anyway, then that state law is in place.
Okay.
Thank you. Commissioner Fletcher?
I just wanted to thank you for taking your time out today and serving the community in which you have, in bringing out 3 important points, all extremely valid. I anticipate at the close of the public discussion that there will be a motion by 1 or possibly 5 commissioners, because you make perfectly valid sense in order to be able to serve the community at large in a legal, lawful manner. I want you to know that on first blush of this, again, leaning towards the law enforcement end, giving the sheriff the capacity, the deputies the capacity, the detectives who are working these cases day in and day out, the ability to be able to track and ensure the safety of the citizens is of paramount importance. But you bring in the business end, and that client or that patient that you were talking about that did not make it here today, that patient needs to be served carefully and needs to be served professionally and with a law-abiding pharmacy and pain management clinic. And I think that's the ultimate goal in this ordinance. But we have a lot of work to do with eliminating the
Absolutely.
less than scrupulous. As you said, you operate scrupulously. Well, there are so many that do not. But I want to thank you today, and I think you've made an impact in this ordinance.
Thank you.
Commissioner Whaley, you have one more word?
Yeah, just a comment with not only this, but ordinances and laws that are passed all the time. You're always trying to stop the bad guy, and it penalizes or puts at a disadvantage the good guys that are trying to play by the rules, and we put more of a burden on them, more red tape, more costs, more fees, and the bad guys keep figuring a way around it. There's somebody, I don't know if it was Peter, the attorney, that said it's cat and mouse, and it's unfortunate, but it's a way of life, and I appreciate the public input, and that's why we have these public meetings, is to try and eliminate as much of that as possible, and because the responsible people are going to follow the laws. The irresponsible people, no matter what laws we make, are just going to find another way around them. So.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I do want to commend you guys very much. I very much appreciate what you've done. I appreciate your fight. I appreciate the moratorium that you had in place, and I have no problem with fighting the fight. I just wanted to make sure and bring this to your attention. Now, I don't know if my colleagues want to come forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Name and address to the record, please.
Greg DiCrescenzo from Perkins Indian River Pharmacy. I just want to thank you for taking time to listen to the independent pharmacy. A couple of points that I was writing. I just heard about this last night and rushed over here. The point I wanted to make was this is a big problem, this pill mill issue. I was on ROP twice in the last 5 years for narcotics here. It is a big problem. I have 10 surgery centers that I consult for and do subsequent business from there. That the number of the 20% could have affected me to have to turn away patients that have a hip done and need pain medicine. I don't do any prescriptions from any pill mills and could be challenged with that 20% number. All legitimate business. In the hospice program, whoever has that contract definitely will have issues with the 20% figure. I don't know what the answer is on the regulation side. You'll have all access to, it's eForce is the program that we'll be reporting to the state. We have to do it weekly. I wish it was daily. It would help us enforce our customer base better. But I think there are enough protections right now to do the tracking and to succeed in the pill mill problem that we have here. But I just wanted to thank you for taking time to listen to the independent pharmacy.
Thank you for coming here today.
Okay.
Anyone else from the public would like to speak on this issue? There being no one else, we'll close the public hearing. Gentlemen?
Mr. Chairman, I'm You're talking about, Madeline, just to go back to page 50, that you were talking about removing the first sentence and the last sentence of page 51. But where I think I was lost is whenever you said we go back and change what in section 31502.
Yeah.
You lost me there.
Well, what happens, the first sentence of 31507 has the 20% restriction.
Right.
When you get to the last phrase of that same section, it says, provided, however, that these restrictions shall not apply to a pharmacy which operates within or is an accessory to a facility described in 315021.
021, okay.
You go back there and you find, for example, the hospitals.
Page 42.
The surgery centers, places like that. So what my point is, if we're taking out the 20%, then we should also pull out the proviso that dictated where the 20% would not apply, because that proviso was really in there just to deal with the 20% restriction.
So, all right, do you want to take this in 2 bites? Go ahead and let's change the language at the end of page 50 and scratch the 20%. And if that's the case, I'll move that, and then we'll come back in second.
Fine. We have a motion to remove the 20% phraseology discussed by Mr. Plotwich. Motion was made by Commissioner Davis, seconded by Commissioner Flesher. Any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Now,
motion passes 5-0.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Davis.
Okay, looking on page 42 then, of 350.
I'm sorry, did your motion include the last sentence? And
Yes.
also? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so the proviso's out as well.
Yes.
Proviso's out as
Yeah.
well.
The 2
Okay.
changes for page 50 and top of 51. All right. Now looking at the 31502.1 on page 42.
Simple.
Do we need to unstrike? Is that what you're? First of all, is that the right part you're talking about?
I'm not following your question at this point.
You said, is there anything that we had to go back into after we changed the 20% now to make it so that pharmacies, surgical centers?
No, you've taken care of that issue by
Okay.
eliminating the proviso.
All right, I just wanted to make sure.
In my view, unless there's some other issue you want to talk about, the only remaining issue is that abbreviated application for
And that's
pain
what's-
management clinics,
And that's what's in front of us.
which was the 2-to-2 issue last time.
I move we approve what we have in front of us now.
Well, no, we have to make the choice between the full or the abbreviated form.
I thought he brought forward the abbreviated.
Yes, I did bring it. It is in here with an abbreviated form for those specialty pain management clinics.
That's
So
what
if you
both
adopt
forms
what
are
you
in.
have here, it incorporates that
The
abbreviated.
abbreviated form. So you're anticipating that it might be a 3 vote this time versus 2.
I'm not anticipating where the vote's going.
All I'm trying to do is put my spin on it.
As I read his backup, we have a choice between either one of them. So I think for this motion, it'd be good to specify which form you want to go forward.
Mr. Chairman?
I'll let Commissioner Davis finish up.
In light of what we just heard from some of the businesses out there, that it's kind of where I was thinking the last time, and I would move we approve what we have here with the abbreviated form.
And I'll second that. We have a motion from Commissioner Davis for the abbreviated form, seconded by Commissioner Solari. Commissioner Flesher.
Well, before we moved forward, I wanted to know if the sheriff is here, and welcome back, Sheriff. We appreciate your presence, and I wanted to know if you had any input as to the enforceability before we move forward.
I've read it all, I agree with the motion.
You agree with the motion on the abbreviated? Thank you.
Any other discussion? Commissioner O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Recently in the paper, there was an article about overdose deaths, and the prescription drug overdose death rate is up 61% since 2003 in the state of Florida. Oxycodone death rate is up 265% since 2003. This is a pretty serious issue. This is not the case of somebody coming in and having to pull a fence permit and going through any bureaucratic hoops. This is real life and death issues. The abbreviated application allows for certain individuals, if they're board certified, to be exempt from the full application. And just because you're board certified does not mean you're an angel and follow all the laws. In the first case, these people all have gotten their doctor's degree, but they're still churning out pill mills. Now, they took a Hippocratic oath to do the right thing and provide proper care, but deep down, morally, what they're doing is wrong. So just because they're a doctor, they're not an angel. And just because they go and get board certified does not mean they'll be an angel. We have attorneys that are bar certified, and they get in trouble for ethical, moral, and illegal activities. Politicians take an oath, swear to the Constitution, and they end up doing unethical, immoral, and illegal activities. If you put yourself in the place of a doctor right now, and they're under tremendous pressure from the legal system, they're getting sued constantly every time they turn around, they're getting pushed by federal regulations to lower and lower their rates, and you can see, if you're a doctor and you've got some big bills to pay, and you're fighting these lawsuits, and you say, you know, I'll take a year, I'll get board certified, and I'll open up a mill, and I'll crank out $100,000 cash a week, and I can work for a year, and when I walk away, I'm done, I'm retired. So if you put yourself in that position, it's not hard to see why these folks fall into that trap. But just because you're board certified does not mean you become an angel. As Alan said, it's a constant game of cat and mouse between regulatory and the bad guys. And you know, I would bet right now, because of what the state of Florida did, there's somebody out there right now figuring out how to counterfeit a board diploma so they can get around that exemption. I would almost bet my last dollar that's happening right now as we speak. This won't have a great impact on our businesses. Remember, the permit application is to open a pain management clinic. Talked to Bob Keating yesterday, and when we passed this in May, we gave 60 days for any existing pain management clinic to come in and get their permit without paying the $200 fee, and no one has come up and applied for the permit. Bob feels that there currently are no pain management clinics that this ordinance would apply to in Indian River County. There might be one within the city of Vero Beach. So really, this isn't going to affect any current business because we don't have any pain management clinics in the county. What it will do is help prevent any of the pill mills from coming into our county. And then the final thing is, I think we have to look at our respective positions, and I know we're on a different side here, but I think the question to ask is, what if I'm wrong? What if my position is wrong? What's the worst case scenario? What's the unintended consequence of my vote today? If I vote in favor of the extended application, the full application, what's the worst case scenario for a legitimate pain management clinic to happen to them? They'll probably have to spend maybe an extra hour on the paperwork and maybe pay an extra $100 on a permit application for 2 years. So the worst case scenario is a legitimate business spends a little bit more time on paperwork and maybe pays a little bit higher permit fee. What's the worst case scenario if we go with the abbreviated and the bad guys find a loophole? The pain management clinic could get set up and somebody could die from an overdose. So I would rather err on the side of caution because this is a life and death issue and it won't impact any current business. And I think if we look at what's the worst case scenario, I think we're better off being a little bit more aggressive than non-aggressive. So I will be opposed to the motion and supportive of the full application process. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I seconded the motion, and it's because I believe that from everything we've heard, the abbreviated version will do everything that you'd actually want. And I'll note that, first of all, I was the one who initially brought the pain management problem to the attention of the board, and that was after reading the Brevard County Grand Jury report. So I understand the problem about deaths and the scale and scope of this problem, which is huge. However, we've listened to testimony from law enforcement who says there's no benefit to the bigger form. We've listened to the medical community that says there's no benefit to the bigger form. It seems to me the only thing that benefits from having the bigger form is the bureaucracy, and I think that this is going the wrong way. I will note, though, that in Commissioner O'Brien's comments, he said that all this will mean is an extra hour on the paperwork. Now, I don't follow, say, Greg's business too much, but I've gone into Perkins often and seen him working behind the counter all the time. And again, not knowing his business, but knowing a lot of people who work and a lot of what they do, I would think that an extra hour of paperwork would be material. And remember, this is an extra hour of paperwork after probably already doing 15 or 20 or 25 hours of paperwork. I know that when we go get a drug now, we sign our name to everything. It's already a big paperwork extravaganza anyway, getting a drug, regardless of how simple it is. All I get is singular and full names, but I got to sign documents and everything like that. I know he has to report it. But if that's an extra hour of paperwork, what does that take away from? My guess is that it takes away an extra hour from that pharmacist's family. And if you're saying, if you want to say that, well, okay, maybe the big burden will mean that someone's life is taken away, well, maybe the big burden will be that these pharmacists don't spend that extra hour with their kid, and instead of being supervised by the pharmacist, they get into a car and have a car wreck. So you can go either way with this. But at the end of the day, I'd much rather have every pharmacist in this community spend 1 hour a day with their family than on paperwork that's absolutely not necessary. So for those reasons,
Mr. Chairman, in response to that, it's 1 hour every 2 years, not every day. And let me just give you an example of the difference between the two. And the wrong form is they had to provide a sworn statement certifying that within the previous 10 years that no person associated with the pain management clinic has been found by any county, municipal board, commission, etc., to have been acting in violation of any controlled substances. Okay? So then we go back 10 years and make sure that nobody associated with this pain management clinic has been a previous pill mill clinic. The new permit just says a sworn statement saying that in the future they'll abide by the law. To me, that's a huge difference. It's a huge, huge difference. So I see the abbreviated one as just opening a lot of holes that a bad guy with intentions to do the wrong thing is going to get around. So,
question. You know, I appreciate what both of you are saying, but for instance, with Peter, what he just said, you know, sworn statement whether it's 10 years or 1 year. If it's a pill mill, they're criminals to begin with.
Exactly.
Is their sworn statement going to be worth anything?
No, but it gives you the enforcement. If you do the background check and find that they violated this is the whole point, is to give us an enforcement action and then tell the sheriff they're in violation of the code, go shut them down. That's the important thing. Yes, as a criminal, they're going to lie. They're going to give you a sworn statement, but then you do a background check and say, hey, wait a minute, you lied, we're shutting you down. That's the difference.
I believe the sheriff would like to make a comment.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to-
Why don't you come up to the dais if you could? Oh.
If you, also, please keep in mind that after 10/1 of 10 last October, pill mills you cannot receive your pills on campus. They have to go to a pharmacy. So I think there's some confusion whether you go to a pill mill and you walk out with your pills. That's not the case. Florida legislature changed that last year, so please keep that in mind.
Right.
They are going to commercial and other pharmacies, you know that, but they're not getting billed on campus. I think that's important in your ordinance.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Davis.
I appreciate Commissioner O'Brien's passion on it. I really feel I've talked to the guys on the streets, Deputy Starr, Sheriff, and the industry, and the adage that it's just one more form is, I'm sorry, but I have signed a paycheck, and I'm not talking about the back of it, and I understand what another form does. And so with that being said, Commissioner O'Brien, I appreciate your passion. What I would like to do is, if you'd like, I'd like to evaluate this in another 6 months, perhaps, to see. And if I'm wrong, I'll be man enough to say I'm wrong and support your motion next time around. But this time, I feel like that the state's moving at a relatively fast speed. I know certainly we are in trying to get this imposed to move forward. And we will be back evaluating this probably again to bring it in line with and compliance with the state statute next year. Because as everybody knows, they're going to find a way to get around it. And we're just going to have to take another step and try to balance it a little bit more. So I'm going to stay with my motion.
Any final comments?
On last discussion, when Commissioner Wheeler was absent, we did have a rather split situation, and that's why we're here today. I have to say that I agree 100% with Commissioner O'Brien, and thank you for laying that out as you did. Whether enforcement, our law enforcement entities want to have the strongest or a strong tool, and yes, there is moving legislation as we speak. I would rather Indian River be known for the toughest regulation and still allow the good pharmacists to be able to do their job, the good doctors to be able to do their job, but I think we need to have the highest wall so that others would not want to come to Indian River County to operate. Again, we're not talking about a 7-foot tree as opposed to a 9-foot tree. We're talking about human lives, and quite frankly, they're lost every day due to this one controlled substance being manipulated through pill mills. And I don't think we ever want to see a pill mill getting rooted into Indian River County. With that, I'm going to maintain my original stance. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Davis to go with the short abbreviated form, which was seconded by Commissioner Solari. Any other comments?
The only thing I'd say, and I'm going to go with what appears to be the majority. I appreciate Commissioner Fletcher and O'Brien's comments, but I just see this, as I stated earlier, putting a bigger burden on legitimate businesses, trying to do something that's somewhat insignificant to the criminal element. So,
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, it passes 3-2. Commissioner Fletcher and Commissioner O'Brien dissenting. Thank you very much. We'll now take a 10-minute break and reconvene at about 10:42.
Right in the middle. I'm just kidding.
Need a roll of water.
Yeah, it's working out.
Testing.
Tell my mom that she keeps on prophesying. She's gonna be a teacher. Yeah, that's right. Showtime. Showtime.
I wish I could do it.
How are you, John? Good. What are you here on today? Oh, I think you got to wait, unfortunately, a little bit of a wait ahead of you. Yeah. Everybody hanging in there doing just fine. How about you? Good. Good. Very good. Take care now.
We can make this the 30-second version. 30-second version is we give our presentation, Bob turns to Alan and says, "Is it our money?" And Alan says, "Yes," and we go, "There you are."
Well, we'll see if that's going to happen. Hello, it's time to reconvene the July 12th meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. Next up, we have public discussion items. A request to speak from Asset Research and Recovery regarding impact fee refunds. Good morning, Mr. Wilson. Please give your name and address for the record.
Good morning. Thank you, Commissioner. My name is Charles Wilson. I live at 1057 6th Avenue in Vero Beach, Florida. Appreciate the opportunity to come before you today. I want to introduce myself, and we're going to have two people in our presentation team, Annabelle North Robertson, who's our Director of Communications, and my friend Steve Deerdorf, who is our Director of Research. First, I want you to know what Asset Research and Recovery is. It's a company here in Vero Beach. For disclosure purposes, I'm a minority stockholder in Asset Research and Recovery. We represent only a fraction of the people in our community that are going to be affected by what happens today. As you may have heard, we are a for-profit company, heaven forbid, and we provide what we consider to be a needed service. We also provide employment opportunities. We pay taxes and are licensed by the City of Vero Beach and the State of Florida. We operate in 44 counties and over 200 cities in Florida, and I must start by complimenting the Indian River County. You are blessed with a superb and knowledgeable staff. Compared to some of the staffs that we deal with across the state, it's head and shoulders above some of the things that we run into. Some counties are very cooperative and very knowledgeable. We call them angels, and some counties are not very cooperative and not very knowledgeable, and we call them Decepticons. And we'll have to see where we all fall. I'd like to compliment Mr. Brown, particularly Jason Brown, has been very responsive to a multitude of public information requests that were necessary to get to the bottom of all the things that we've been able to find. I'd also like to thank Nancy Woods in the Community Service Department, Community Development Department, for her service. She's been very helpful, and whenever service is required, very pleasant. Sandy Wright in your legal department has been extremely helpful in bringing some of the more difficult items to a conclusion that we'll be able to report to you today. And of course, Mr. Brown and Mr. Baird defend the county's money like a mother over their kitten. However, it is our mission to identify refundable assets held by government and return those assets to their rightful owners, creating assets for individuals, jobs in the private sector, and profits for shareholders. It is to fulfill that mission that we are here today to tell you that we have discovered multiple refunds being held by Indian River County that should be or should have been returned to the people of Indian River County. It will also be clear that it is very likely that many average citizens would find it impossible to receive these funds on their own. Asset Research and Recovery does not use any state lists. In fact, until now, no list existed. And generally, with few exceptions, counties and cities are very reluctant to provide the information necessary. Today's presentation will have 5 parts: a little history on the impact fees of Indian River County, some current issues that need your attention, some funds, particular funds that are in question that we need to discuss. We're going to make some requests and recommendations, and we'd like to have a discussion with commissioners and staff. And if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, if you could afford me the opportunity when we are finished, that we be allowed to respond to staff when they have their discussion. In private conversations with some of the commissioners, we have detected that there may be some disagreement on some points, and we need to make sure that is fully aired, and I appreciate your patience. The 2 things we intend to show in our efforts, we intend to show, number 1, that there are, in fact, impact fee refunds available in the past, currently, and in the future in Indian River County. We have heard often that there are none. We will prove today that, in fact, there are. We will also show you that a system is in place. Many of you know that there is a system, a mechanism is in place, but that mechanism discourages citizens from collecting refunds that are due them and have been promised to them. So briefly, the history. First of all, how much? I don't want to delude you with lots of paperwork. I'll show this to you if you really want to. But this is a list of all the counties in the state of Florida that impose impact fees. And the latest figure we have, unfortunately, is from 2006, which would have been very high. But rather than show you this, take the time to show you this, the balance available, or the balance of impact fees collected and still in banks in counties across the state of Florida, at this time was $1,060,493,876. Now that $1 billion was taken from people who employ people in the state of Florida. Now, currently, this is just the counties. There is also a list that I have of all the cities, which is more than $353 million at this time. It does not include school boards, fire districts, and special districts. It is safe to say that even in this downturn, and even with that, the current balances in the state of Florida exceed $1 billion. In Indian River County, the traffic impact fees were started sometime in the mid-'80s. Some question of whether it was 85 or 87. Those traffic impact fees are a 6-year fund. If they are not expended within 6 years, they are supposed to be returned. In 1999, the Commission established a new traffic series of districts and fees. Then in 2005, a whole series of other impact fees were initiated. And also in 2005, a provision was placed that requires a $200 application fee for a citizen who wants to get their own money back. We'll discuss that $200 fee in detail later on in this presentation. Also, there was a refund policy that was administratively rewritten in January of 2011 that I'm not sure whether the Commission ever actually voted on or not. I haven't been able to find it. But it effectively changed the rules for refunds that disenfranchised a number of people who would otherwise be have refunds coming to them. The next item that I have is I want to try a little bit of background, and I'd like to explain something that we call that there's one impact fee, but we have to separate them because of their requirements. And so we've termed them impact fee A and impact fee B. Now, this is just a reason for us to be able to show you an example. Impact fee A, the thing that separates them, and I've shown you the actual code that the county has here on your screen. The major differences are that impact fee A has a 6-year refund period. What that means is that when you paid in 2004, in 2010, your refund would be refunded to you. Now, most of these impact fees were not adopted until 2005. The reason I say 2004 is because the traffic funds were in place before 2005. The second thing that's different about A's is that it is unexpended money. If the county has expended all the money, then that's where you turn to the person and say, you don't have a refund because we've expended the money. The third item is that it is who it's payable to. An impact fee A is payable to the current homeowner. Now, this is a problem for some people getting their refunds because they weren't the original payer of impact fee A. They have sold or bought the house 3 times. They have no way of knowing that an impact fee was paid 6 years previous to the time that they have it coming back to them. The next item that identifies an impact fee A is that it does not require a $200 application fee. The $200 application fee is only required out of the building department, which is basically an impact fee B. Now, an impact fee B, for the definition of those who don't know, which is most of the world, is that it is payable immediately. You do not wait the 6 years, and the reason for that is any building permit who is expired, withdrawn, or canceled, you have a right to your impact fee money back immediately because you caused no impact. Now, there are hundreds of them in Indian River County at this moment. It also is payable whether you expend the money or not. Even if you've expended every single penny in a fund, you must return an impact fee B's money to them. So to say that there is no refund because the terms has expired is inaccurate. The fact is there are refunds. There have always been refunds. There are refunds now, and there will be refunds in the future. Also, it requires that the payee, in this case, with an impact fee B, according to your code, is the person who wrote the check. Now, in many cases, the person who wrote the check is the builder. And the builder received a reimbursement from a client at some point in history, but the county's code requires that that money be returned to the payor unless it is assigned or there is an heir or assignee. So the strange thing is that could be also paid to someone who is not the equitable receiver of the money. Lastly, impact fee Bs require a $200 application fee. And you'll see when we discuss this later on that this $200 application fee is not only an impediment to somebody getting their money back, but you will take the situation where we'll show you a case where a home builder, in this case Miranda Homes, just 3 months ago, received a $51,000 refund over multiple properties, and his application fee was $200. If you're an individual homeowner and you come and you've got a $350 refund for your parks, your portion of parks, your application fee is $200. So you are charging someone $200 to get $300, which we believe is an impediment to receiving an impact fee refund. What I'd like to do now is turn the podium over to Ms. Robertson, Annabelle Robertson, our Director of Communications, and she can discuss with you the legal situation that we're in. Thank you.
Annabelle Robertson, North, 2801 Flight Safety Drive, Vero Beach. Good morning, gentlemen. I was going to go over a number of the issues which Mr. Wilson has just briefed you on. As you may know, that impact fees are created under state statute 163, providing for the levying of impact fees by local government under home rule power. Indian River's Title 10 governs impact fees. and impact fees were first imposed in 1985 with the creation of the traffic impact fee that was intended to ensure that new development bore a proportionate share of costs of capital expenditures necessary to provide traffic and transportation facilities in the county. The first impact fees were imposed for traffic. According to our ordinances here in Indian River County, impact fees are intended to address the maintenance of current levels of service. Our ordinances establish that current levels of service in the 9 facilities for which impact fees are currently collected. In fact, the language that creates level of service is embedded in the ordinance. Levying of impact fees requires a determination of a proportionate share of the capital costs for public services necessary to accommodate new development, and a substantial benefit must be shown to the new development for which those funds were collected. So there is a connection between the funds which are collected being from new development, and there must be an ability to show a benefit to those people from which those funds were collected for the facility for which the impact fees are spent. Impact fees are a wonderful method for local government to address the issue of new development and the cost on a county or municipality of new development. They're wonderful for acquiring capital improvements, but they are limited because they're a statutory animal. They can't just be used for whatever. They're not general funds. They can't be used for maintenance and operations, and state law has constrained what they may be used for. Additionally, according to our ordinance, funds must be expended as they are collected. Our review period for the use of impact fees in Indian River County requires that each fiscal period a presentation of proposed capital improvements be presented to the Board of County Commissioners. This mechanism is used to assign the use of funds during that following year, and any funds that are not assigned during that following fiscal period are to be replaced in trust funds, and the only way those are to be used during that year outside the use of the CIP or capital improvement program is for refunds. So that's specific to the language of our ordinance. As Mr. Wilson explained, there are 2 types of refunds. First are those tied to the revocation, expiration, or withdrawal of a building permit. And the second are those that are tied to the use of the impact fees by the county within the 6-year holding period. With the first type, which we refer to as impact fee Bs, I remember it B, building permit, the refund is paid to the fee payer. A fee is charged by the county to offset the cost of the refund, and the refund is owing immediately, regardless of whether the funds have been spent or encumbered. Under the second type, or impact fee As, and I remember that because of annual, it relates to years, the fund is paid by the refund is paid to the current landowner. No fee is charged for the issuance of the refund, and the refund is limited to a 1-year period after the expiration of the 6-year holding period. And it's that 1-year limitation that when you are addressing the issues of a number of issues which we will go into, of change of ownership, lack of notice requirement in our statute, that limit a landowner's ability to have actual knowledge that the county is holding funds to which they are owed. And the refund period being only 1 year, at the expiration of it, individuals are denied rights to their property. And that's a very punitive outcome of an ordinance. What we're discussing here today is a fund that relates to impact fee A's. What we want to discuss is the old Traffic Fund 101, which was created in 1985 with the which originated from the levying of impact fees in 9 districts in Indian River County. In 1997, the Board of County Commissioners reduced that original 9 districts to 3 districts. I'm going to ask Steve to help me move forward in explaining the financial aspects of Fund 101.
Stephen Meredith, 21st Court, Vero Beach. Originally, as Annabelle explained, there was 9 traffic districts that were created. And this map here shows those 9 districts, and they're numbered. Go on to the next one. In 1987, you could discuss, due to the limitations of having 9 districts, you're forced to spend money that's collected in a small area. Right? By 1997, you realized that. By 1999, you created 3 traffic districts, which allow you to collect money in a larger area and spend it where it's needed within that area. And that's key, is that traffic impact fees must be spent in the district it is collected. And it must be for capacity increases. Right? Now, when you created the 3 districts, which, by the way, as I said, was a great idea, the 9 remaining districts' funds had to remain in those 9 districts. As the years passed, 8 of those 9 districts, 8 of those 9 districts had expended all of their funds. Here is the Traffic Impact Fee Fund 101, showing balances still available as of July 31st, 2010. And you'll see District 2 up there, which is the Barrier Island south of the 17th Street Bridge, or the Causeway Boulevard there. You'll see that there is $1,138,995 as of July 31st, 2010. And the grand totals of all the balances and so forth in all the accounts are in the next column, or the next section down. And I'm not sure why there's a dollar difference there. Maybe there's a dollar in another account that I didn't see or something. But if you go to the next screen, please. In this screen, this is May 31st, 2011, 10 months later. This account has grown by well over $1,000. And that's just in interest. It's grown to $1,145,130. And as you can see in the grand totals, that dollar's been corrected there. These funds are still available. The question is, can you spend them? Go to the next screen, please. Actually, the interest was $6,175 in those 10 months. So it's probably up to around $6,423 now, just in interest. Go back to the 9 districts. Going back to this screen here, we see the Traffic District 2 is on the Barrier Island, as I stated. Now, the problem is that $1,145,000 has to be spent in that district, and it has to be for roadway capacity increases. It can't be for landscaping or for maintenance or for resurfacing a road, and it has to be for roads that are under the jurisdiction of Indian River County. Now, some of these funds were collected from the City of Vero Beach development. Whenever a developer in Vero Beach paid their impact fee, it was paid to the county, and the county administrated that fund. So some of these funds are earmarked for within the city limits of Vero Beach. But the whole issue is that in 1998, if you had a homeowner or a builder build a house in Traffic District 2, these are some of the problems. 6 years later, they come in and say, am I entitled to a refund under this code? What are they going to, the answer they're going to hear is, where do you live? You tell them, and they say, oh, you're in Traffic District 3, and we have spent all of that money. You're not in Traffic District 2, because most of the staff doesn't know that. That is one of the barriers that Mr. Wilson was referring to, is that it's this constant, over and repeated problems of people understanding that they may have a refund. And refunds were available at that time because this fund had money in it, as did several of the other funds, although they were being dwindled. Earlier, Chairman Solari, you mentioned a legal issue being fair and equitable. And this is obviously, these funds are out of the refund period of the 6 years, but it's a fair and equitable decision is to refund this money to these residents and infuse that money back into the community. There is nothing else you can do with that money. It just sits there. Thank you. Annabelle?
As you've seen, there's money in the Fund 101 District 2 that has not been spent. I believe the fund balance sheets will reflect that no expenditures have been made out of that account in 13 years. There's been no activity in the account. Additionally, from the information we were provided by the county, no refunds were ever made out of this account. I would say that if no refunds were ever made out of this account, it is evidence that the notice requirement or the ability of a citizen or homeowner to acquire a refund didn't work. The 600 people for which refunds are owed under the money that's currently held by the county in that account, they weren't able to receive they either because they'd purchased the home, or even if they built the home, because of the change in the redistricting and the information that would be provided if they called and gave their address, they would be told that they were in District 3. District 3 either hadn't matured at that point, or District 3 had no money in it at that point. No refunds are due, an owing. It's not as simple to say that a homeowner has an obligation under our ordinance, that it's their responsibility to go out there and know that they have money owing to them. This is the mechanism under which it can be returned. It's your responsibility, because your responsibility, that logic would dictate that 600 people simply chose to leave this $1 million there. I would assert that based on the problematic accounting for the funds, meaning that there's question about the way in which a public citizen would seek to stay informed about the fund balances, that with that coupled with the lack of notice to homeowners, either actual or constructive, which was exacerbated by the change in districting, the inability of the county to utilize these funds within the district, either over the past 13 years or moving forward, and the existence of a fund balance, we're here today to ask the board to consider reopening the application period to Fund 101 to the homeowners that live in District 2, allowing them to apply for these refunds from which the county is simply holding the funds. I'll turn the podium back over to Mr. Wilson at this point.
Thank you. At least we can show that there are a number of people that should have gotten their money back under this kind of situation. They frankly could not, even though it may seem that there was a mechanism. The fact is, it's sort of like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. You know, they say you should have seen. It was your responsibility to look up the law, and it was on file on Mars for the last 90 days, and you should have been able to. It was your responsibility to find it. Well, it was just too difficult. An individual simply cannot identify that they are due a refund. I'd like to mention the $200 fee again. There is a $200 application fee. It's really strange that it is on your, one of the other impediments is that it's on your application to the building department to be able to request a refund. Unfortunately, there are two different applications, and one of them has a refund for impact fees like this, the 6-year fund, and the other one doesn't. The one that's online has a 6-year fee. The one that's available in the office, I'm sorry, it's the other way around. The one online does not have an application for the 6-year fee. The one in the office does require a 6-year fee. So basically, one of the things we wanted to mention to you is the inequity of that $200. But the question also is what about refunds? This is a list that was provided by the county that shows that so far, even while citizens have been told that there were no refunds available, so far, $3,067,412.15 has been refunded between 2002 and 2011. None of them from this 101. This is dead and stranded fund. These are 23 refunds that have been made in the last year, mostly to people that know what to do. An individual citizen has no way of doing this. Of that $3 million, 1.5% were individual homeowners. The rest of that $3 million went to large builders and people who have inside knowledge of how government operates. We'll tell you in a few minutes about we've made telephone calls to a lot of these people, and they don't know what an impact fee is, more or less being able to go find that they have a refund coming. This also shows the evidence where Miranda Homes, as an example, this is Miranda Homes. Miranda Homes got their refund, let's see, in March 31st of 2011 for $51,116.46. And in order to get that $51,000, here's their receipt. They paid $200. Now, this was all during the time the citizens were being told that there were no refunds. Now, I understand that there may have been some confusion between the impact fee A's and the impact fee B's. Now, so that's basically what we're being told is oh, you meant that $3 million. So the fact is that one of the things that we came today to prove is that there are refunds due. We'd like the county to acknowledge that there are refunds due, and how that's done. Annabelle, do you have anything else before I summarize? You want to go through those maps right here? All we can say is that the 101 fund, the main road in 101, in that District 2 101, is A1A. Okay, it's a state road. The second is that if you paid your impact fee in 1998, and you pay that into District 2, then you are not coupled with the new levels of service that would exist in 2030. That is not with the impact fee, the promise of impact fees, that it's not just a number, it is a person that is attached to that development. The city of Vero Beach has already notified the state that that District 2 is relatively built out. There cannot be further development. It exists right now in a level of service that is consistent with the comp plan. The fact is you've got $1,145,000 that you cannot use effectively, and by some oversight, not by this staff and not by this commission, it has been stranded there. And you have some number of people that live in that area that have expressed an interest to get their money back. So we believe it is incumbent upon the county to do that. So I'll go ahead and summarize real fast. There are some other issues that are going to come up. We put those off in the interest of time. As an example, the difference between, there's something called the nexus of proof, and that means that you have to prove that an impact fee can be used for something. And this came up when we tried to warn you about the sheriff's office purchase. Now, the sheriff's office purchase, in the minutes, it said that I disagreed with the sheriff's office purchase of that land to square off the sheriff's office. I can't tell you whether it was a good expenditure or not. It's none of my business. It could have been the best expenditure since the Louisiana purchase. The fact is, in our opinion, it does not qualify for impact fees because it does not increase in capacity, it does not go with your CPI, with the CPI, and it also intermingles funds. So now the question is, are we going to question that? No, but it's an example of that $900,000. If somebody wanted to challenge that $900,000 would have to be withdrawn, replaced in the impact fee fund, and paid out of general fund or reserves or some other fund. That would endanger people's salaries. Under impact fees, you're giving this money back to their rightful owners, would not affect a single salary, would not affect a single employee, would not affect the general fund in any way. The second is the traffic impact fee, the capacity of new residents for impact fees, and that is you have to give it, you have to attach it to a resident. You can't say, well, we've got the money now, and therefore I get to spend it any way I want to, anytime I want to, because it is attached to an individual, is attached to the fee payer. And when Commissioner O'Brien particularly championed the impact fees, we're not here to question championing the impact fees, but one of the critical points of the impact fee is it is attached to the person who causes it. Okay? This money that is sitting in that fund, 101, this $1.1 million, is not attached to the person that is causing anything that's happening today. That's the reason there is an expiration period. The 6 years is because you can't go on forever. I can't be charged for something in 2010. Also, the unfairness of why the expiration period? What does that do? That lets the county just sit there quietly, hoping that the clock ticks off long enough that somebody doesn't claim their money. I don't understand. There's also the burden of proof. Now, in this case, in most cases, when you ask someone if we're bringing a case now to refund $1.1 million, in most cases, it's up to the person to prove that the $1.1 million is there and all the other parts. In this case, the state legislature knew the power, the great power of government against an individual. An individual has no chance of getting government to do that. So they passed a law that the burden of proof is on the county. It is not on the person bringing the action. The burden of proof that impact fees were spent correctly is on the county. Also, there's an issue of accounting for interest. There is a third way of getting refunds besides A and B, and that third way is an audit. That if you find anything that has been spent incorrectly, that incorrect expenditure has to immediately be placed back into the refund, into the same fund, and available for refunds by those who have then matured. There's also a question of, there's been a creep since these impact fees were first passed. First you said it was, by golly, you give us these impact fees, we'll go, and if we don't use it in 6 years, we'll return it. Well, it didn't quite happen. So this fund expired, nobody knew, nobody got the information. I'm sure you guys didn't know. So how could Virginia Upton on South Beach? No. So, but now, according to the staff, their reading is they've got 6 years and a quarter, 6 years and 3 months. There's a conflict in your code there, and it's used. Does that dissuade people? Yes. Are people told there aren't any refunds? Yes. Does that dissuade people? Absolutely. There's also a new administrative rule that is inconsistent with Indian River County policies. The new administrative rules was placed in January of 2011, and basically it said that in order to get a refund for the impact fee Bs, which is that you withdrew or canceled your building permit, in order to get that, if you've had a form board inspection, you no longer have access to a refund. Now, the form board inspection is the very first inspection on a piece of construction. Problem is that you have a rule also that says you cannot live on a property unless it has a CO. Okay? If you can't live on the property, you can't go to a library, you can't go to a public building, you can't use law enforcement, and etc. So it is our contention, and will be our contention, that those refunds are still available to people who did not complete their houses and do not have COs. And so these things, I want to suggest that we can actually be helpful in the future to help you close up some of these things, because you've got multiple legal cases before you right now based upon the problems that you're having with impact fees. So in summary, I would like to suggest that we have that this does not affect the general fund. It does not affect salaries. You have promised that when passed that refunds would go back to the public. We have confirmed that refunds, in fact, do exist in Indian River County. We have confirmed in 101 that balances do exist, that it was not known or applied for, that they are not, and also they were never accounted for as a liability. You know, we've been told that the reason that we don't account for these as a liability is because there were none due. But between 1998 and 2005, they were due, because this 101 was expired and was never accounted for as a liability. It is also not connected to the actual payer. So finally, we plead and urge the board to move to reopen the refund period, allowing property owners to apply for refunds due to the inoperable nature of the fund and the lack of notice to property owners regarding the right to a refund. And number two, we asked and prayed that the board to clarify the current resolution requiring a $200 payment by property owners seeking refunds of impact fees, and move to suspend the said fee and to proceed with evaluating the appropriate fee based on actual cost of refunding to the county. The $200 fee right now represents 10 hours and has to be at cost. So is it our case that it takes 10 hours to do a refund? So, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our presentation. We'll be happy to answer any questions. You have a serious problem. The staff has done nothing wrong. We're not saying that they've not told the truth or they haven't done anything else. They have told the truth, but perhaps some things were omitted that perhaps we could have helped to fill in today. I appreciate your patience.
Thank you. Any questions for the asset recovery team?
I just would like to explain some things. First of all,
Joe, if you could, I just want to see if the commissioners have any questions of the asset recovery team first. Okay, there being none now.
Yeah, I would like to. We put the first time we put impact fees in place was actually, I looked it up. It was March 1st. They went into effect March 1st, 1986, when our traffic impact fees, and we created Fund 101, and that's the fund that Mr. Wilson's talking about. We've accounted for that fund separately. In fact, we've sent out monthly reports on that. That's why it still sits in that fund. We have nothing. We haven't hid anything. If you'll look at the chart, he shows that we collected roughly, I think, if you'll throw it back, and that is our chart. That's a chart that we produce every month in the budget office. We produce one for all impact fees. We are transparent. Anyone can get them from us. And Fund 101, if you'll look, and 101 is on the beach. It's the Causeway intersection there and A1A. We do account for it by city. We don't have to, but the cities like to know what we collected in their cities. And there is that project's been on and off. But I'd like to show you that if you look at that fund, and if someone could throw it back up on the screen.
It's ready.
Okay. You'll see that, and we followed our ordinance. If you look that what we collected from, and if you look at total fees collected, it was 25 million. We spent 27. A lot of so it exceeds what we collected. A lot of it's interest income is most of it. 900 and some. And Jason will explain that. We followed our ordinance in that I feel we did, and we had hired a professional to draft the language in the ordinance, and the professional drafted the language pretty standard with the 6 years. Of most counties have this very similar language, and so there was no attempt. We acknowledge the money's there. They knew. You get this monthly report. There's 50 people get this monthly report, so everyone knew this fund had money in it, and the project still could happen. We do feel, and Chris Moore is here, that we will have to widen that 17th Street intersection. I go through it every morning, so I know on the Causeway. In fact, we're looking at purchasing land right now for the future and widen it. So it is an obligation. We have, under the ordinance, Charlie is correct, the 6 years, there's that 1 year period to get refunded. We didn't have applications. It's right in our ordinance. So that was all done by our ordinance in place, which I don't have the authority to circumvent ordinances. The other thing that was mentioned was the $3 million that we refunded, and I have to laugh at that because the $3 million is very complicated. We have developers come in, they do a development, they realize they don't need all the capacity, it gets smaller, or they want to put a bridge in ahead of waiting or a turn lane, so we give them credits back. That's what that money did. So we've always worked. In fact,
Charlie brought up several times Mr. Paladin's property, which was a widening that we owed him back per developer's agreement. So if you do this, this, and this, you put it in ahead, we'll give you impact fee credits, which means we give you a refund. So a lot of that was that. And that just shows that we have been giving them back. And they're not insiders, they're professional developers, professional builders that enter these agreements with us a lot, or determined that they bought too much capacity, and either to err on the safe side during the time there was problems with people having concurrency. So that's how that occurred. The $200 refund, I see that as a problem for an individual, and I don't disagree, but I don't have the authority to waive it. We've got it, and we could work on changing that. I want it very clear. There's not anyone that's been more transparent on impact fees than our staff. You can go back to day one, and you guys get the report every month. It goes to the commission office, it goes to 50 people in the community who request it, and you can see every accounting of everything we spent from day one. So we think we've done a good job there. As far as your policies, we're not disagreeing that in Fund 101, in fact, we're accounting for it separate, that we haven't spent the money, but we may need to do that. That's what was collected for that intersection. I don't have the right to refund it even if I wanted to. You've got an ordinance that specifies the rules of what my staff can do, and we went by those rules. I think you're going to end up spending a lot more in that area, and if you don't, you're going to have to find it somewhere else. But we still need to widen. I think you end up widening it. That project's been on and off by the City of Vero Beach Council, but it'll be one day they won't be able to issue down the road a building permit due to the fact it doesn't meet concurrency. We will have to widen it. And like I said, we're right now working with buying a piece of property from Northern Trust to handle that. We started this week on that again. And so that's simply how it sits. I don't know, the $200, I don't really have a problem if the commission wants to reduce that. I didn't know. There's a lot different, when you look at impact fees, there's a lot different things. What happens with the $200, it gets a little confused, and it's not just impact fees. The $200 in the building, what you've done is you've asked for a building permit, you want a refund for the building permit fees, you want a refund for impact fees. It's not, and they might have to go out and look at the property and do an inspection, make sure there's nothing going on in that. You haven't asked for an inspection yet, but you've already started building the house. That can happen. That's why that fee, I think, is in place. And Bob and I think Jason can clarify these issues a little bit more. It's complicated. It's not easy. There are different scenarios for different situations. I will say the $3 million, most of the $3 million is big builders, people who we determined that they didn't owe impact fees because they bought too many, or they put a bridge in for us, got impact fee credit, so we refunded. They needed a turn lane in before we could get it in. They put it in, and then we gave them a credit for it. Those kind of things. Those were standard, and they were usually agreements approved by the board. So those are standard things. And they're not insiders. They're professionals who do that for a living. And I want that clear. So that basically summarizes it. We have had a lot. I've got 3 pages of public records requests from Mr. Wilson. He has kept my staff busy, and on these issues, and we've tried to fulfill them on a timely basis. And we give him an accounting. He's accounting on my impact fee reports every month, and we can send them to anyone online. We're open. We can put it on our website. We don't have a problem with all that. We've got an A in transparency. They're on our website. Boy, we're really hiding things.
Any questions of Mr. Baird? I'm going to, if it's okay with you, gentlemen, I'm going to see if anybody else from the public wants to speak on this. And if they do, come on up to the podium, please. Name and address for the record, please.
Good morning, Commissioners. Tim Zork, 7658 South Polo Grounds Lane, Vero Beach. Just like to have by a show of hands, who was here in 1985, 1986 when the ordinance went to effect?
As in, lived here?
No, was involved in county government at the time. So Bob, Jason was still in high school, I think. I'm not sure. So it's kind of a short list. We got Teddy's back here. He was. There you go. And I have to make a couple disclosures. I'm here wearing two hats today. One as a builder who, from 1985 on during the preliminary meetings, the adoption in 2006 to 1999, all the meetings going forward, I've never been a big fee of the calculation methodology of impact fees, but that's not pertinent today. But I do need to disclose my relationship with asset recovery, that I do have a relationship with them dealing with the builder community. The one thing that I can see I failed to do for my industry is over the 26 years of dealing on this, I never read clearly the refund terminology. I think Commissioner Wheeler, at one of the prior meetings, my parents videotape every time I speak. They're probably recording today. And they have it on tape in one of the old meetings where I think Commissioner Wheeler had asked, and what if we don't use the money? And the response was, it would be refunded. But I never looked to read the refund terminology. That is a big mistake on my part, because some of this could have been resolved and refunded at an earlier time frame. But over the last few months, I've been just kind of reviewing some information, looking at the $3 million list, and what prompted the January 13th change in policy. The change in the January 13th policy, how many of these refunds that weren't applicable to what Joe explained, the ones I'm looking at seem to have individual permit numbers that were canceled and such, so I'm looking at a different type of refund. Still a refund of impact fees, but not applicable to Joe's explanation. And if there was no need to change, what prompted the January 13th change to put different restrictions in on a refund policy? One other thing that I've noticed regarding the $200 fee is very few of the people who applied for a refund paid the $200 fee at application. They might have paid it a few days later. They sometimes paid it 2 days before the check was cut. I don't know why it's inconsistent. I think it's also inequitable based on one person getting $51,000 back on multiple permits that they've decided to cancel, pays one fee, where an individual homeowner can come in and they pay the $200 fee on maybe a $900 or $1,100 refund. So I do see a lot of issues that need clarification and also not just looking at any River County, but looking around the state. They seem to use standard Dr. Nicholas, where's Bob, our good friend, Dr. Nicholas, who makes more money off the word impact fee than any consultant in the United States. And you guys have paid him a hefty fortune over the last 26 years. But each one is uniquely different on how a refund is actually paid to somebody. You know, some it's time frame. Is it an A or is it a B? And some people think, there's been some misconception in some news stories that, well, you just go to the state list and look and see if you got money sitting there, and you go to the county and you ask for it back. The reason they have a staff of people to unravel this is because it takes a staff of people to unravel it. Even I, who I thought I had a pretty good knowledge of the workings of these things, I learn things every week that you have to do that? You got to be kidding me. You know, the obstacles, I'm not necessarily saying particularly here. Here I see just inconsistencies of applications of when fees are paid. And I'm looking at application for refund, stamped received. I'm looking at the printed date for receipt of a $200 payment, and many times they're not the same. And then I look at that compared to the date the check was written, and can see that they all should be the same date. I know when I paid a fee here, if you got a stamped received, a receipt paid, and a copy of your check, they're all dated the same day. They're not dated 3 different transaction times over a period of, a couple of weeks. So I think you'll be seeing more of us. Other counties will be seeing more of us. And the 101 fund issue that's a box. That's for you guys to unravel here today. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public? Come on up. Name and address to the record, please.
Deborah Seeley. I'm an employee of Asset Research and Recovery, 2801 Flight Safety Drive. I just wanted to take just a few minutes and tell you I'm correspondence and mailroom and have a lot of association with people that call in and write in and ask the questions. The primary question that we're asked when a patron receives our letter, we encourage them to call in if they have additional questions or need additional information. And when they do, In the conversation, they reveal that they are somewhat older, they don't understand, they're unable to drive. We've had several phone calls from people who are hospitalized, got the letter, but very interested. A small portion are retiring age. Some are, I said, in the hospital, but all to a great extent do not know what an impact fee is and can't conceive how they could be due something back. Overall, it seems very confusing to the general public, and as bizarre as it may sound, frequent question is, if I'm due a refund, why didn't the county contact me and let me know this? Or I don't know, you're not on the Florida Treasure Hunt site, which is the one Tim referred to, so how can this be? They think that's the Bible for anything that is due back to you if you live in the state of Florida. And of course, you're not going to find impact fees, escrow funds, or anything like that on that site. In closing, I just wanted to say that we have a responsibility to the persons that we represent, and you have a responsibility to all of them. Please reopen the fund period and consider refunding the money to those people. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public? Come on up, name and address for the record, please.
Keith Kite, 1045 Winding River Road, Vero Beach, which happens to be in District 2. This is just ironic that I'm here. I was just over at the building department and the planning department. First thing I want to say is to Mr. Baird, he's absolutely right. The county is the most transparent county I've ever worked in with impact fees. And as you all know, I'm a sophisticated builder and paid hundreds of thousands of dollars in impact fees. I got a letter from Asset Recovery about a month ago, so I thought, I was pretty sophisticated. What's the money? Did the Florida website, etc. And I'm here walking by on my 510 project, just applying for my 6-year refund because of the 510 road and the project that we had put in place up there. It's a $22,000 refund for $200. But I've now figured out, just standing here, that I built my house in 1997 in Castaway 2, in District 2, and I have a, $1,400 refund, and I couldn't find it, and I came back here and went in, and I mean, we're buying tax lien certificates in the county. We're pretty sophisticated on the county's website. We know where our impact fees are, etc. So I don't know, I'm just stepping up in the middle of this. I don't, care which way really it goes or my impact fee. I just want to point out that it is true that I couldn't find it. And I do track all my impact fees. I built my house. Obviously it has the fund requirement there, but I also agree with, Joe, that maybe the fee needs to be used with 17th and A1A. A1A was supposed to be this and that. So I don't know what your final situation is, but I have to support the citizenry that says, you can't find these impact fees if they are due. So I don't know what the situation or the route is to the citizens on their individual level, other than I've worked with the county, very well about my impact fees. So I don't know how this got where it is. I just wanted to tell you that.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Anybody else from the public? Name and address for the record, please.
Fred Mansky, I need to diverge for a minute. Unfortunately, due to a medical appointment, I cannot stay and speak on item 2. I'd like that scheduled for the next commission meeting, please. Mr. Fletcher has some knowledge on the second part of it. He may speak to you afterward, but I cannot remain. Thank you.
Okay.
We'll put you on the next meeting.
Thank you, Joe. Anybody else from the public? What I'm going to do now, if it's okay, I'm going to see if the commissioners have any more questions of staff or anything, and then Charlie, I'll give you a chance to wrap up and respond. Mr. Davis.
No, they have to change. I've done the impact fee B's are talking about with people that call up wanting to auction a piece of property. My job is to try to find value any way I can, and a vacant lot right now with the impact fees paid is the same price as a vacant lot without the impact fees paid, for all intents and purposes. That's just what's happening in the marketplace. So I've done it and with sophisticated builders as recent as the middle of May. And it was the $200. I've just basically said, here's the application, let them do it, and whenever they're done, I pick it up and drop it off. And so I understand exactly what you're talking about with your impact fee Bs. That's not new and revolutionary. Now, as far as the impact fee As, I'm assuming everybody agrees how much is in the account. There's no dispute over that. Now, my question is, where is the county's area in the old Section 2 that we can use impact fee dollars of any kind, not just impact fee $2, but also where it's in, what is that, impact fee area 3 now? Is that the old 2 is now 3?
Yeah. I think the widening program was all in the city. However, we may have to do that intersection no matter. We may not do it all, but we do have to widen it.
Okay, I'm good with that, but I just want to make sure. I know that A1A, no, I say that. Let me ask, can we spend this $1 million anywhere on A1A?
Yes.
Okay.
And let me tell you, anywhere in District 2 on A1A, yes. Back in, I think, the late 1990s, there was an A1A corridor study that determined that we needed to widen A1A one lane in one direction, and it's from Seagull Lane up to 17th Street Causeway. And that's the project that the city of Vero Beach has been working on for a while, and it's a project Chris can talk about.
Yeah, Chris Morrow, Public Works Director. We do have that intersection of 17th Street or Causeway Boulevard and A1A still in our work program. It's still active. It's been designed. The only thing that's been holding the project up is acquisition of right-of-way. There are 2 banks, PNC on the northeast corner, Northern Trust on the southeast corner, that we need to acquire right-of-way from before we can build that roadway. But that would not be the only intersection. There could be left turn lanes added along A1A. Those also add capacity. So it could be spent in different ways. As long as there's a capacity addition, that is the key. And as Bob mentioned, it could be spent anywhere within that old district.
Okay, so then it is not a true statement then that impact fees, or specifically these impact fees in Fund 101, can in fact be spent on state roads?
That's correct. They can.
Okay.
Any other questions by staff? Charlie, would you like to wrap up?
A couple of things. Spending impact fees on state roads. I think that's what happened in State Road 60. So 2 issues come up. Number one,
that's incorrect. Just want to stop you. That's incorrect. It's gas tax and infrastructure tax.
Thank you.
But, Mr. Baird, let him speak and correct him afterwards, if you would.
I guess proving again that this is a very difficult subject, and a very difficult subject for people out there to understand. And the fact is that this fund has not been used in 13 years. Now, all of a sudden, we've got a plan to widen an intersection that is not even in our jurisdiction. This is a state road. We have talked to the city. The city has no plans. They didn't even know it was there. The city has no plans. In fact, they have already talked to the state, and they've said that there cannot be additional building, so there's not additional impact because there's no additional construction of projects going on A1A. Part of the reason is that you cannot use an impact fee to make up for a previous deficiency. And that's what we're trying to do. It is a red herring. The whole intersection thing is a red herring. If you will find, you cannot use that money, at least efficiently. And the second thing is it's not in the 5-year plan. Now, you can make up a reason to spend anything. We've already found that out. You can make up a reason to spend anything. But even if you could spend it, which I don't believe you could, even if you could spend it, it is not attributable to the person that paid in 1998. What you're doing now is you're collecting new fees in District 3. And District 3 encompasses that part of the beach that encompasses the new impacts on that intersection. So if you want to do the intersection, and I doubt very seriously do, other than we just got some money on the credit card, is you are collecting that money in District 3 already. You have been for 10 years. So if you have to make improvements on that section, make it out of the new impact fee money. The old impact fee money is not there to be used forever. So the fact is, Commissioners, is that for 13 years, you have held on to a fund that people desperately need. And had they known, and had there been an avenue for them to get their money back, you cannot say, the only two propositions that you can have is either number one, that we didn't know about it and didn't tell that, or that we knew about it and didn't tell anybody. So you would have to assume if that every single one of these people all of a sudden decided, you know what, I don't need this money, the county needs this money, I'm going to leave it there. Every single one of them to the man. And I don't believe that is the case. So, Commissioners, you've got a chance to wear a white hat here. You know, is government, I would assume that government would do this in Washington, maybe Tallahassee, in the city, but I don't believe that it can be done in this county. And so hoarding money that really should have already been given back is like having a lady with just too many cats. You know, you just want one more cat. You know, the fact is this money needs to go back, and it's in your codes that it needs to go back. So I urge you to do as we ask. There is agreement, I believe, with Mr. Baird that the $200 fee simply needs to be dispensed with or changed, or at least follow your code that it should be, because the code says it should be retained. Doesn't mean that you should charge in advance, because right now you're charging in advance for somebody to find out that they may not have a refund. So the $200 fee, I think we can reach agreement on. Going towards the future, how we deal with impact fee Bs and how we account for impact fee As, we can work on together. And frankly, I have 44 more counties and 200 other cities to twerk off. so as soon as we can get through with these, you know, we're going to bring more employment to this county. And so I can tell you that you cannot, should not efficiently, honorably use that money for the purposes set aside. I urge you to return that money to people who need it. They're dying. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
Chairman. I would just like to point out Section 1010.5 subsection 4 of our county ordinance asserts that proceeds from the trust accounts shall be used exclusively for capital expansion of the county's major roadway systems as identified on the county and or other municipalities' thoroughfare plan maps. I believe that our ordinance limits the use of these funds to county roadways. I know that your planning division has just said that it can be used on state roadways. I know that in your the 2030 transportation maps, which we'd hoped to have on the overhead but apparently didn't transfer from our PowerPoint, demonstrate that the jurisdictional responsibility of the A1A 17th Street is a state road, which is map figure 4.2.1 jurisdictional responsibility. Additionally, that 2030 plan shows that the existing level of roadways out on that island through 2030 never falls below D, which is the level of service identified in our ordinance. Our ordinance calls for the use of impact fees in increasing capacity that falls below level of service caused by new development. If our level of service is D and there's no projected fall below the level of service D on the island, it is not tied. The impact fee does not tie, the use of that impact fee does not tie to creating an increase in level of service because we have no deficiency in level of service on the island. Thank you.
Thanks. Do you have something specific to?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I think she referred to county roadway system, and the county roadway system, the county thoroughfare plan includes all of the roadways in the county, including state roadways. And in fact, we include in our concurrency management system, and we always have, the state roadways, State Road 60, US 1, and so forth.
Okay.
Can I ask a question about directly on that? And we didn't use impact fees for State Road 60? We use, what y'all say, sales tax and gas tax, as well as the special impact fees. No?
I don't think we've stayed away I don't think we used impact fees. We stayed away from, we're very careful about that because part of that was reconstruction. And we were careful. Now, when we lent the money to first of all, we lent the money to the state. Right. That's going to be, I didn't want to get in a legal thing over the impact fees. Okay. So we didn't. We used gas tax and infrastructure tax. We borrowed from there for that. So there would be no legal challenge.
If I may, we have, I think, before us two relatively specific issues, and given the complicated nature of this, if we could, from this point forward, sort of stay on those two issues until we get them done, which are the two issues being, as I understand it, again, please correct me if I'm wrong. One is that Asset Recovery is asking us to reopen application window for Fund 101, basically stating that these funds were developed in the 90s, they should have been spent sometimes in the 90s, and it's not equitable to the homeowners involved who would possibly get these fees to have shut them out because there was never any mechanism for them to really be aware. The second one deals with the $200 fee payment, and it seems from what they've said we have two choices that they would think would be more equitable. One is, instead of having a process where we get the $200 fee somewhere along the line, simply say that a $200 fee may be retained from your funds that are due from you, or if this board chooses, just do away with the $200 fund in its entirety. That's how I understand it. Please correct me if I'm misspoken in any way.
Yes, that is correct, and the only other thing is with transparency. Some, like the state of Georgia as an example, Hillsborough County will send you a list of the people to be refunded. The state of Georgia requires a legal notice where they publish it in the newspaper.
And that's something for going forward, and going forward we may well decide that we'd like to give our taxpayers a little better mechanism of being aware of it. So, okay, now you're going to limit yourself to one of those two issues. Great.
I'll limit myself to one of those two issues. First of all, on the impact fee, the old Fund 101, we collected $1,655,000 in impact fees from inception in 1986 through the end of that fund, through current. We have spent about $1.5 million. Our calculations show that most of the remaining funds are interest earnings from the impact fees because we spend the impact fees first. Case in point, if we do get into a situation where we have to refund impact fees, we have to refund them with interest that we've earned. So basically, based on my calculations, you're talking about $150,000, maybe $200,000 of that $1.1 million balance. It would be from impact fees possibly. The rest would be from interest earnings. And I also wanted to just correct that as we sit here today, because of the one-year window in this situation and in all of the other fees, we do not owe any refunds under that 6-year time period. I think I've been credited with maybe misstating that there are no impact fee refunds due. I went back and looked at the tape from the April 12th meeting where we were talking about letting the contract for also road widening that Mr. Wilson said we shouldn't let, and also the Sheriff's Department land purchase. And I think that's the meeting that it was talked about where I said there are no impact fee refunds due. Both of those conversations were regarding after Ms. Annabelle North talked about the 6-year window and that the money was owed back. And I think even in my conversation, if you took one sentence from that, I may have said no impact fee refunds were due, but that was followed up by another sentence where I talked about the 6-year period. So I don't want, I want to clarify that we didn't make a misstatement or a misrepresentation. We were specifically talking about, the whole conversation was about the 6-year period. So the other situation where the impact fee B refunds are due, that is a case where if somebody has decided they're not going to build, they may want an impact fee refund back, but that's like saying Walmart owes their customers tens of millions of dollars because their customers are going to return something they bought last week there. Walmart doesn't know that.
So I think we've got your point.
Okay. And I think that's, basically we're largely on the expenditure of those dollars, and we are open and transparent. We have the monthly reports out on the county website, and I invite anybody to look at those.
Thank you very much.
I'd also like to point out that this isn't just A and B. They've made this an A and B issue, but you've got concurrency certificates. You're going to want people, if we're going to write them, they're going to lose their concurrency certificates. Then you become number one enemy down the road. So I think you've got to be very careful how you handle this. And we have followed our ordinance, and I don't believe, and it's up to our attorney, that we can refund under our existing ordinance for 101. We followed it to the T. And so that time period's, and that's what staff has to do, and I think we're doing the right thing. In fact, I think I'm one of the people that's supposed to get a refund. If you look at it the way they say, and I disagree with them. I live there, so I disagree with them totally.
Commissioner Davis.
Now, this really has, the only thing this has to do with the concurrency certificate is whenever you pull a building permit, you only have a 1-year traffic concurrency certificate. Is that correct? A typical building permit.
Yes, that's correct. But let me add, I haven't looked specifically into the Miranda example that was given, but I'm assuming Miranda got a 1-year initial certificate for a number of lots altogether, and they paid the $51,000 at one time. They didn't come in and pay the $51,000 at like $10,000 a piece for 50 lots. And if that's the case, we would give the refund for the initial concurrency certificate and then the amount that represents if they're requesting the refund for non-commencement.
I had somebody that paid 3 of them in Pine Tree Park, and I'll get with you after this is over because I don't remember whether it was $600 or $200 for all 3, but I'll get with you whenever we're finished with this.
Last time.
Sharon, when you say last time, do you want us to wrap it up?
Well, I thought you did a couple times ago. And then Go ahead.
I would just wanted to respond first to a statement made by Mr. Brown regarding the expenditure of interest. He said we expend the impact fees, we hold on to the interest, and we expend that second. I think the ordinance of the Indian River Ordinance 1000.13, which establishes the mechanism for how trust fund fee monies are expended, clearly states that funds have to be assigned with their accrued interest, meaning that funds have to be expended with their accrued interest. The CIP shall assign funds, including any accrued interest, from the facility impact fee trust funds. So I would question the mechanism that he's asserting that they utilize because I don't think it follows the ordinance. Additionally, in response to something that was stated by Mr. Mora or Mr. Baird regarding the state road A1A and the utilization of county impact fees on that, even if you assert that if you agree that their assertion that we can utilize impact fees on state roads, that's not the end of the argument, and I want you commissioners to remember the question is the level of service deficient? And our projections through 2030 on that road is no deficiency below this level of service, which is D, established in the ordinance. So that even if you can spend them, you still can't spend them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Wilson.
I just want to bring up that this is a good example. When you're talking about this, there's always something else that comes up. There's always some way to fall back and do something else. And I just want to point this one thing out as the final perfect example. In 1998, there was no internet. So it doesn't matter that you have Fund 101 on the internet. When it was time for these people to get their refunds, there wasn't one. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, is just another way of saying, oh, we get to keep the money. And so again, how does a single individual, we're representing just a handful of those numbers of people get, and we're coming pleading with you on their behalf to stand up for them. You have more power, you can do whatever you want to. But the fact is, they need your help. There's a lot of red herrings going on here, we know it. The fact is, we've held those people's money for 13 years. You need to give it back. Thank you.
I'd like to...
Can I address Ms. North quickly?
Yes, Jason.
It says that the CIP shall assign funds including any accrued interest from the facilities impact fees. We do include the interest earnings in the CIP as part of the revenue source to balance that 5-year CIP that we're looking at. So I don't think there's anything inconsistent with that. And I do want to say I think we've talked about the $200. Maybe we need to look at that, lowering that. I think we should harmonize it because it's due in one place and it's not due in the other. And we've got similar work. We've actually got more work in the other case where we've got to go back and calculate interest for any refund period. And I just want to say that we're open and transparent. If Indian River County owes you money, we're not going to hide it. We're not going to try and run and stick it under a rock. We're open and transparent with it. Our point is that on these 6 years, as we've said, none were due. If the board wants to make a change and pay the Fund 101 back, you can do that. I think, as Joe said, it'll require an ordinance change, but staff could never do that without board action. So we're not hiding, saying it didn't, and then here staff's been lying.
Nobody said that, Jason, and at this point, I think you're overreacting to it. Okay.
Can I?
Let me ask, if I could, Alan, one question. Alan, under our code as it's presently written, could we today, if we wanted to, go ahead and start the process to give those the impact fees, which Mr. Wilson's company says are due, back to the residents?
I don't know the answer, but my best guess is no, as currently written.
Okay, I mean, just for an aside, before this board makes the decision, I think we ought to at least first direct our attorney to look into the matter some and get a little more clarity on that. So the other thing is, I do see Ms. Renzi, she seems to want to make one more comment, so I'll come on up. Come on up, please.
Thank you. Renee Renzi, Waverly Place, Vero Beach. Fantastic discussion. I've enjoyed it very much. But one thing hasn't come up. From the point of view of the private homeowner buying a house since this went into effect, since the impact fees were imposed, how would that buyer know what they had paid, or if they had paid? Would it be a line item on their closing statement? No?
I think most realtors disclose when I think that they'll find. Wait, no, I think that they'll say we paid impact fees or not, because it can be a selling feature.
You're right there, Joe, but this is the scary thing, if I understand it correctly, is, in fact, I could sell a piece of property with the impact fees paid, but with it being the person that paid the impact fees, the only one that can get the refund. Then after it closes, then he can go back, or she can go back and get the impact fees on the impact fee B after the closing.
That is correct.
For existing houses that were built in the 1990s?
No, vacant lots.
No, I understand, but that's confusing the issue again. That's not the issue that he's talking about right now. I don't believe vacant lots down in the South County. It's people who have been in their homes for 10 or 15 years, and that goes to Mrs. Renzi's question, who don't know or would never think that they had a reason to question the impact fee. That's the issue.
I agree.
Okay.
And can I ask a question about the interest? Because this is really, that's all that seems to be left for the most part.
Yeah.
Is really the interest. So how do you determine if my impact fee that I paid in 19 then had to do with any of that interest, so that I'm eligible for a refund?
What we do is we start at the beginning of time, in this case 1986, and we say we collect an impact fee. The first dollar that we spend, we're saying we spent the first impact fee. So we do a calculation basically month by month, because that's, if we get into a refund situation, it'll have to get down to the individual one, but we do it month by month. We say, okay, we've spent $1 million in impact fees. So we go back and say, the first $1 million that we collected in impact fees, those are the ones we've spent. Now, if we get to any point where we've spent all the impact fees, then we start spending the interest earnings until we start receiving the impact fees again. So we basically have a clock, so it's first in, first out. So whenever we spend $1, we say, okay, there's another impact fee gone. So that's how we do that calculation on a monthly basis, basically.
Interest is earned on something. You have to have a principal to be able to get the interest.
The
It's
second
just
part,
an accounting trick.
Hold on, let's hear from Mrs. Renzi and let her sit down, and then we'll...
the second part of the question is, if you bought the house from a developer who presumably had to pay impact fees on the whole development, do you apply to the developer for your refund or to the county?
In the case of impact fee B, it is to whoever paid the money. Even if you paid your builder and he paid the fee, the builder has the right to take that money. Now, the equitable owner is the person that was the homeowner at the time that the house was built. And so our position is that we have to get the builder to sign off, but we return the money to the equitable owner, who was the owner at the time that the home was built. But they have no way of knowing that.
No.
Okay, so that's...
Okay, thank you.
We have one more comment from the audience.
Oh, sure, thank you. Dale Simchek, Sebastian, Florida. Good day. Some of the questions that have come up today, I too have been getting inquiries and have noticed the $200 fee. I would agree that is, for a homeowner, a very large fee. And I have several people that have done extensions to their home and are inquiring about the refunds. I too am providing services for people, sort of a e-refund IRC web-based company. It's an infancy stage, and it's a free service. It does encompass areas such as impact fees, but also you have utilities, and that the public is entitled to refunds, and you are touching that today. So it will also set precedents for refunds along with interest. There are refunds in the utilities, and there are too, I agree with Ms. Seeley, people from hospitals and things like that have moved or gone into nursing homes with refunds on deposits, not only with the county utilities, but also Comcast, DirecTV, refunds due them. So I'm asking that, first of all, that you be consistent with people such as myself. I've been a records specialist and know the time-consuming hours that will be sucked up by your records specialists. And I want to make sure that you are charging myself and other companies the right amount of money to take those resources away from staff. But also I want to make sure that the public is aware of these refunds in the utilities-based section of government, and also that we are more in tune with having those posted as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if I may then...
May I ask Jason a question on the interest?
I think okay, go ahead and ask. But I think the interest is a different question for a different time, but go ahead and ask Jason.
Well, it deals with the amount of money available in Fund 101. Jason, as you collect, say, I'm just going to throw out a year here, 1990, you collect $200,000, for example, in actual funds that you collect on building, or on impact fees. That $200,000 occurs a certain amount of interest, right? The following fiscal year of 1991, you collect, we'll say, $150,000. Now, as you spend that money, do you not spend the interest that was occurred during 1990 prior to spending the funds you collected in 1991?
We spend the impact fees first, and once we run through the impact fees, then we start spending the interest earnings.
But do you spend the interest earnings from that year prior to spending the earnings from the next year, or the fees?
If we've spent all of those funds from the prior year, then we would start spending the interest earnings.
Can I ask a question right along that? Because
go ahead.
My question is then can somebody make that they want to make a claim in the 6 period time then, and say, I'm making a claim on this because it's the interest that was that year, therefore it's not expired?
So what we basically have is at the bottom of we have it in Fund 102, which says the month from which we're spending the impact fees, and if that ever gets to the 6-year period at the end of the quarter, then those funds would be due for a refund. I don't think the interest, because we have to refund the impact fees with interest. For example, in the District 2 case, I say about $200,000 of those are impact fees remaining. If the board says, yes, we're going to refund that $200,000 of impact fees, we're going to go back, calculate interest. We'll pay something like $300,000 because it'll have all the interest attached to it when we pay it back. So we don't want to pay the interest out. We've got to pay the interest on the impact fees in the first place. That's why we spend the interest dollars last.
Commissioner Davis, this is why we say that we're going to have to address this issue, and we put it off because it was originally in our presentation. But the answer is that the rule is that it's first in, first out. It's as it is paid and as it is, and so our point is that it is the interest is collected. It also, part of the rule, if I'm generalizing, is that the interest is paid based upon what the county makes. Okay. It is based upon the county's income, and the county accounts for its receipts every quarter. So our position is that you can't carry forward that interest, especially, I don't think you can carry it from one quarter to the next. But you certainly can't carry it from 1 year to the next. So the late evening fact of that this is all interest and therefore is not connected in any way to those impact fees is just another means for being able to keep this money. The fact is that interest is first in, first out. That interest is earned on that principal, not in general, but for that one person. Remember, he's paying an impact fee for the impact that he or she is causing. It's not a tax, it's a fee. And so that interest is collected directly to his payment. Okay? So and no other county, out of 44 counties and 200 cities, no other one does it this way. So it's
No, because, hold on. We're at the point where, for the interest issue is tied to the first one of whether we reopen the application window for Fund 101. That, I think, has to go by our county attorney first. So, unless I'm corrected by a county commissioner, I would hope that some commissioner in a motion directs the county attorney to address that question, and they can ask staff to come up with their feel on the interest portion of it at the same time. At the same time, Mr. Wilson's company is welcome to do the same. But if we're ever going to finish this, I think we have to do it that way and then discuss the $200 fee payment probably as a separate motion. So I think that's where we are. So unless any commissioner who's welcome to wants to correct me on that procedure, then I think that's that direction we ought to go.
I'll be glad to make a motion that we direct the county attorney to review some of the issues brought up today and report back to the board at some time in the future.
Second. Yeah.
And does that specifically deal with the reopening of whether?
I think kind of the whole discussion, just let Alan do a thorough review of the whole issue.
Okay, there's a motion from Commissioner O'Brien on that, a second from Commissioner Flesher.
Can I just,
yes, you may.
for discussion, and to me, a really big difference in here is where the county is saying that we can use these on impact on county roads or state roads versus the other side, and I kind of see a little bit of grain of I don't know, each side in that. So if somebody could just make it a little more black and white for me whenever they come forward.
Clarification probably from Public Works. When that
Public Works, the MPO,
from whenever, by the time we come up with that.
Chris made that fairly clear.
Well, let him make it more clear next time around.
I think that's a policy decision. Because here's what we've said: all of the state roads would apply.
Well, let them make it clear to us what we've said in the past, then, so we have exact clarity on that. But I don't think that's the issue before us today at this point. So we have a motion from Commissioner O'Brien, a second from Commissioner Flesher. Any other discussion on this motion? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I would like to, it can be either incorporated this if they see fit or do it afterwards, but I would like to revisit and also, if need be, clean up our ordinance concerning the $200.
Let's make that part of the second motion.
Okay.
Separate. Thank you. So, any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes 5-0. Now the chair will entertain a motion on the issue of the $200 fee payment, which is presently required.
Okay, I would like to make a motion that we revisit and clean up, if necessary, our ordinance on impact fees pertaining to two things. One, I'd like to see it worded in such a way that individual homeowners, and I don't know how to do this, so a large developer with 300, 400 homes or impact fees can come in and do it individually, and because there's a lot more work if you're doing volume than if you're doing it one-on-one. Plus, we're dealing with professionals versus individuals. So the $200, some way to find a way to give the individual homeowner a break. Secondly, I'd also like to see in that ordinance, because we track these impact fees, when those impact fees have expired or it's time for a refund, rather than them, as I understand it at this point, applying for that, I think we should notify them that that's available to them, and we should track it, and we should let them know. If I borrow money from somebody, and let's say that's what the impact fee, we're borrowing the money, but we didn't use it for what it was intended for, we need to pay them back, and we need to tell them we need to pay them back. We don't need to sit back and let those people wait and then figure out a way whether they have a fee or not. I think we should be up front with that and say, we owe you the fee, send us back this receipt, whatever you want to call it, affidavit, whatever, and we'll send you a check. And I think we should be tracking it and not the individual. We track everything else in quite detail.
Yeah.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor. Does everybody care to second it?
I'll second it.
Okay, wait a second. If I may on that, I just would like to ask staff if they're clear on the motion, because it got a little complicated.
Mr. Chair?
Let me just ask staff first if they're clear on it, more or less.
Yes.
Okay, good. Commissioner Davis?
Just to justify it. I mean, if it is $200, okay, but, you know, and I think that really, we mentioned the one that we're really not charging for is more difficult to determine, and that would be the impact fee A, I'm assuming. The impact fee B is really simple. I've done it, so.
Well, and my whole objective in this, in the ordinance we passed, is that, you know, we really make an attempt to be fair to all and not just technical.
Yeah, I think what we want is a little higher level of clarity going forward, making it easy for the taxpayer if they get their money. I think that at this point, staff probably understands that. Any other questions of staff? There's the motion from Commissioner Wheeler, the second from Commissioner Davis. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes. Thank you very much. I'm now going to ask the commission if they would like to take a 10-minute break and then come back and finish the meeting, or if they'd like to break for lunch.
10 minutes.
10-minute break.
Break for 10 minutes? Thank you. book.
Thanks, guys.
Where'd Joe go?
Roaring through this thing, we're at the public input section.
No, we finished that.
Yeah, just in.
Finish up less than another 30 seconds. We lost the audience. Oh, we don't like to think that way. Time to reconvene the July 11th meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. We now have departmental matters, utility services, amendment number 1 to work order number 13 with Mastola and Moeller for design services associated with State Road 510 reuse main extension to the North Barrier Island. Good morning.
Chairman, move staff recommendation.
Second.
Motion for staff recommendation from Commissioner O'Brien, second from Commissioner Fleischer. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Olson.
Nice PowerPoint.
Next up, county attorney matters, settlement offer on the Abazis parcels. We will move over that item for a minute because Mr. DeBrawl is not here. If there's no objection, now we're going to wait a minute for Mr. DeBrawl. Mr. DeBrawl, you're up.
Morning, Commissioners. Bill DeBrawl on behalf of the County Attorney's Office. Commissioners, today we have a counterproposal, counteroffer from the Abazis family. The three Abazis brothers, Stephen, William, and Evan, were the co-owners of a 9.8-acre parcel of property that was on the northwest corner of 57th Street and 66th Avenue. The county went ahead and purchased the entire parcel, and as you can see on your screen, an aerial view of it, that parcel consisted of two different tracks. 102 was the right-of-way necessary to construct the 66th Avenue improvements. 401 was the pond site that was needed for the stormwater treatment. We went ahead and agreed to purchase the entire 9.98 acres of property because the take was so severe. We went ahead and deposited the estimate of value based on an appraisal. We've had 2 mediations with the Abazis family. Both were unsuccessful. Then we went ahead a couple of months back and brought to the Commission an offer of judgment that was conveyed and approved and conveyed to the Abazis attorneys, saying that we would agree to pay them $750,000 for the property. If they proceeded to trial and a verdict was less than the $750,000, the county would not be responsible for payment of costs incurred since the date of the refusal. The family has come back and made a counteroffer of $775,000 in satisfaction of the purchase price that is exclusive of attorney's fees and costs incurred to date. Staff's recommendation in this matter is to reject the counteroffer. That is based on the opinion that staff has is that we've been generous with the Abazi family. We agreed to go ahead and purchase the entire tract rather than just the needed property. We think we are paying a fair price that is above market value. And in this matter, even though that they are insisting that the $95,000 per acre price the school board paid back in 2005, we're saying that that was not pertinent for today's discussions and is not a fair comparison. So staff's recommendation is to refuse the $775,000 offer of settlement and reiterate our own $750,000 offer. Or stand by it, I should say.
Move staff recommendation.
Motion from Commissioner Fleischer for staff recommendation, second from Commissioner Davis. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much, Bill.
Thank you, Bill.
Next up, Commissioner items. Commissioner Wheeler has a request for discussion regarding the staffing in the Board of County Commissioner office. Commissioner Wheeler.
Yes, I want to throw out for discussion, in fact, would even recommend that we've lost 2 executive aides or secretaries, and I'd like to recommend that perhaps we look at hiring maybe a part-time receptionist, which would free the 3 current aides that we have in the office up to do the work without interruption for working out front on a daily basis, answering phones, getting interruptions, etc. And I know that when Kim Munsing left, we worked with 3 for a while, and we were probably 2 to 3 times busier than we are now. Also, I think that at some point in time in the near future, we should go back and reevaluate, and even though we're still in the evaluation process to some degree, of our committees and how much time we're spending on committees, the value of the committees, the objective for calling the meetings, the frequency, etc. And I think we need a little more flexibility in somehow deciding. I understand that some of the meetings have been called to approve minutes, and I think they should be a little more necessary than that, which would cut down on taking minutes. And I think, I believe we can become more efficient in our operations as a county office. Plus, we've cut back on employees. We're not near as busy as we were, and I think right now, even without a receptionist, things are still moving along quite well.
Okay, I want to disclose one thing. I didn't think that this matter was going to come before us directly on the staffing, and at a Republican evening club meeting about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was passing by Commissioner Fletcher, and I mentioned that having heard that his assistant was moving off, that I thought we might be able to do with just 3 in the office. I'll note that conversation was not initiated by Commissioner Fletcher. He did not respond to it. So, but I did want to disclose it in case there were any comments on the sunshine.
And I wasn't aware of it.
Well, you weren't aware of it, absolutely. This was something. Yeah, this was something I just mentioned in passing to Commissioner Fletcher. I did pass this by Mr. Plockwich to see if he thought that could anyway be a sunshine violation. He thinks not, but I did want to, for the fullness of the record, disclose that right now.
And I will acknowledge that in the response you got was exactly what you portray. It was just nothing.
You did not. There was no conversation about it. It
conversation
was just in passing, offhand type of thing. So
turned away.
And I will confirm that Commissioner Slaughter did come to me as soon as the issue came up and expressed his concern. I did look at the issue, advised him I did not think there was any violation. He suggested that he disclose it at this meeting. I thought it was a good idea, so that's what he did.
Yes.
That said, we'll go on with the discussion of the staffing. From my point of view, when my personal assistant had an opportunity to move to another part of the county, I did not think for myself that I was getting enough enhanced productivity to warrant another assistant. And given that we had knocked off those 12 committees, I thought we may have enough woman power in the office to distribute some of my work among the other 4. But I will note that that was two important things in that discussion for me. Is one, it was a personal decision, not a board decision. And the second thing is I thought it would work because it was generated sort of from us up rather than imposed down, and because we basically have good relations in the office. So those are sort of 2 parameters which I think are necessary for this. I think basically it needs to be more individual commissioner driven than a board decision. So that said,
if I may,
we'll go Commissioner Wheeler, then Commissioner Fletcher.
Yeah, I would disagree with that because this was set up originally by a board commissioner, not by individual commissioners. In fact, when this came up to hire 5 aides and a receptionist, I was opposed to it, argued against it, voted against it. I never believed at that time that we needed 5 aides and a receptionist. And at a later date, we got rid of the receptionist and spread that along 5 girls. And then your aide left, and now Commissioner Fletcher's aides left. And as I said, there's less going on in the county now. I think that we can survive just fine. And it was a board's decision jointly to decide how we were going to structure the office. So I think that I have no problem with asking this board to reconsider how we structured the office. Now, Commissioner Solari, and I don't believe, no, Commissioner Bryan was here, I think, but Commissioner Solari, you weren't here when we went through that conversation. And I think Commissioner Bowden initiated that. I'm not sure, going by memory, but I looked at the minutes a while ago, and so I'm being consistent. I think that we've been overstaffed in our office, and I still believe that.
I don't believe that's the case, and I believe I have other documentation on the discussion, which you did support the 5/8. It's a matter of motion and record. But in addition, I believe that when Commissioner Solari is correct, his aide had an opportunity, and it was his decision to either replace or not replace. Again, my assistant also had an opportunity, which was actually in the form of a promotion within government, and it was in her area of expertise, and well supported it. And then I saw this on the agenda. I anticipated on being able to replace that individual for the very reason that I believe that we look at numbers very differently. I don't know if, well, Jim is here. I've looked at the history. There were 5 people in the commission office when Peter and I were elected. And then there was a change. And I think that the history is rather thick as to how the change actually took place, and the removal of the executive aide, and then the hiring of 2 more commissioner assistants. Again, we can go through the process, and we can also state that the workload has been reduced, but quite frankly, I don't think it's been reduced, and I believe that the 3 individuals up in the office now are working very diligently, very hard, and we're creating another burden for them without compensation. There are 3, and if one is out on vacation, as which they are due, and if they do have a sick call, or they're at taking a meeting minutes, or they're at another function, or they're even at lunch hour, there's one person in the entire room, one person for all of the calls and concerns that come through for 5 county commissioners. And then, now we're putting a burden on the individual of who do you answer for, who do you answer to, which call do you make, which one, and I believe that it's too much of a burden on the staff that you have within the county commission. And I remind us that this was all done by ordinance, so it's something that we'll have to address and review, and I believe Jim is now up on the staff stand, and he can probably take it from here as far as where we've gotten and where we are right now, and to the capacity in which we have to be employed inside of the county commission office.
Thank you, Commissioner Flesher. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Jim Sexton, Human Resources Director for the record. And just a brief synopsis of the history of where we were and how we got to where we are today. Started in 2007 in February, when the board directed staff to look into reorganizing the commission office, going to individual commissioner assistants. We did some surveying, brought back to the board in May of 2007 several different organizations of which the board could consider. Ultimately, the board decided on going to the current status that you're in now, which is 5 commissioner assistants and 1 receptionist. In June 2007, Will Collins, the county attorney at the time, then put the public hearing together for changing the ordinance, which the ordinance was approved. And then in July 2007, there was one other option brought to the board where there would be 5 commissioner assistants and an office coordinator. That was not approved at the time, and staff was directed to go forward with the 5 commissioner assistants and a receptionist. Sometime thereafter, the receptionist person was let go, and it was decided that we were going to fill the position. Then it was decided that we're no longer going to fill the position, and that person was laid off from employment. So that left us to where we are currently at 5 commissioner assistants. And then I think I heard you say the history already is Commissioner Solari decided upon his assistant's separation that he would not fill his position. And that's basically where we are today, is now that your commissioner assistant has moved on to greener pastures as well, do we fill that position? And that's kind of where we did post the position. Just so the commissioners know, the position was posted for 5 days internally, and now we're just kind of waiting on this discussion to determine if we're going to make any employment decisions going forward.
Was the ordinance changed when we got rid of or laid off or fired the receptionist?
Yeah, the executive aide. Oh, not when the receptionist was changed. No, sir. So technically in the ordinance, it still describes a receptionist position that is available.
When we had made that transition and through ordinance, I believe that a managerial change had taken place where we had an executive aide to be able to manage the office, and there are some ministerial duties that take place, and there also are some cooperative duties that take place within the commissioner assistants. And I believe that the team has been working as well as to be expected, and overcome a lot of those decisions, or the need for those decisions, even with the lack of one or the void of one commissioner assistant. But now with the void of two, if that were to take place, now I believe that there's a need for some managerial application within the office, so we would actually have to replace some sort of management or supervision, because after all, who do the individuals answer to? They were designed to answer to and directly with a commissioner, and now that's not the case. And then which commissioner do they answer to, and what type of design do we have to ensure that there is good management? As far as time, they can't take any overtime, of course, but now we have flex time, or we have uncompensated time or time compensation within the time period. That adds up. And who's to oversee that, approve that? Currently, there are individual commissioners signing off time records. There are individual commissioners basically performing that managerial function. I guess we would have to create another position for management, or some other mode to have that management application take place.
If I could, at this point, I think this shows the problems going forward if it's not a decision generated personally by the commissioner. I mean, basically, my not having an assistant works just because we all basically get along and things fall in the right place. If we make it too much of an issue, managerial or otherwise, I think it collapses in on itself. I mean, when I did go by Commissioner Flesher, I said I thought we could do it where the chairman gets an assistant because the chairman has other duties and papers, and there's a lot more paperwork for the assistant, and we have one assistant for two commissioners. But that's predicated on the idea that we're actually getting along and understand that, and that it's driven from an understanding, or two understandings. One is that the increase of productivity to the individual commissioners isn't sufficient to warrant the job, and two, that we internally get along and understand our own schedules such that, well, I'm going to pair up, I'm here in the mornings, I'm going to pair up with somebody who's here in the afternoons, and we just, as two people on the same team, can do it. But if there's any sense of not agreeing to that, the basic structure necessary for it to succeed goes away. And so again, that's why I believe that this ought to be something that's generated by basically the commissioner who has the assistant now, and that person is in the best position to, I think, see if it's something that will work. I mean, everybody, I think, at this point understands that I'm all for less government. I believe we've shrunk a lot of the work that the assistants have to do, but at the end of the day, it's not my decision to say whether other individual commissioners believe that they can be more efficient with a personal assistant. And, you know, given that I'm never going to be in that position, then as a member of this board, I don't want to cram something down some other person's throat. So, that said, Commissioner Davis.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, whenever you were elected chairman, and it wasn't long after that your aide went to work somewhere else, and And it was at that time I sat down with Misty, my assistant, and I said, you know, Bob's chairman right now. He's fixing to be overwhelmed. Help him out a little bit and go from there. And it worked out very well for me, quite frankly, because I think that the system that I have in place, as well as being there for several years, she knows my system. And then having been the chairman's assistant, she was able to pick right up, and just like she had just continued to do. And I'm sure you ask other ladies in the office to do things quite frequently.
Carrie does a tremendous amount of work, and she basically does the overflow work that I generate as chairman. In fact, everybody up in that office has been extremely cooperative, but it works because I internally made that decision that it could. And I had a pretty good understanding of the workloads of everybody up there and got along individually well with not only the commissioners, but more importantly, the personal assistants. And I was happy to make the commitment to spend a little more time working. All those things work. But for instance, you, with another job, are locked into a situation where you need to get your assistant working at a certain time, and if that is done, then I can take some overflow time. And that's worked out very well. It's a very, very fluid system. But it'll only work as a fluid system if we're all buying into it. The minute that one of us doesn't buy into it, the system calcifies and we lose the ability to do what we want to accomplish. So, from my own perspective.
That's my concern. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
That's my concern. Right now, as we seat as these 5 individuals. But we're swinging around to another political season. There may be some changes, and during that changes, Commissioner Davis brought up an extremely valuable point. He was a previous chairman, and his assistant was also helped me out when I had to sit in for Commissioner Davis in his absence, because Commissioner Davis' assistant had the rundown and all the direction, and when we had to sign off things, it was just done. The transition was great, and I'm sure that enhanced your position, and as well as Commissioner O'Brien when he became chairman as well. But such being the case, all things don't remain constant, or some things do change. You're right, some individuals on the dais have other commitments. Some may leave for a lengthy period of time. Some may have another job or function. I don't, but may up the road, so my position may have to change too as well. I think that other people's needs here may change. And I just even last night I saw that Commissioner O'Brien was getting ready for a presentation, and his assistant was extremely busy getting ready for that function. And if he needed that dedication at that time, and if there were phone calls coming in, and there was a shared responsibility by the assistants that were there, basically there's not a major issue where we're getting flooded with right now. We're not talking about the charter government days or a major impact where the phones are flooded. And when the phones are flooded, quite frankly, I don't believe that the level of staffing that we have is appropriate. I'm not saying that we have to prepare for war in time of peace, but we also should have ample amount of individuals to serve the public to the capacity in which they truly deserve.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Wheeler.
I'd like to make a motion that we go back and reevaluate our staffing, our levels, and responsibilities of our commission office. We aren't following our ordinance, apparently. We have one aide short. We do not have a receptionist that's covered by the ordinance. So we're not following the ordinance. The entire county, across the board, has been cutting back, and I think we can do the same thing. Reading the tea leaves here, though, I think I'm in a minority, but I would like to see staff go back and reevaluate workload and how we can better and more efficiently, without 5 assistants and a receptionist. That worked for many years in this county before we went with personal aides. And I think it can still work. I think there's cooperation in the office. There was before we had our individual assistants. So we're not following the ordinance, let's go back and address it and find out whether we should manage our office differently, and if we can also do as the many other areas in the county have done, and be a little more efficient. And I also think along with that is some of our committees that you brought up before, Mr. Chairman, and so have other commissioners. I think we've got committees. I still think we have committees that we could survive without, particularly now.
Yeah. Okay, let's take, if we could, first we'll go back to the committees in a second, but we have a motion on the floor regarding the ordinance dealing with the staffing in the Board of County Commissioner offices. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Davis, is that a second? Or?
No, I'm happy with sharing.
Let me kill the motion for lack of a second then. Right. Motion dies for lack of a second. Commissioner Davis.
My question is to Mr. Polakowicz. Do they throw us like in carpet jail or something if we have an ordinance that says we have a position but don't fill it?
I'm not entirely sure you do have an ordinance that calls for positions that are not filled. Jim, where's the part about the receptionist? Do you
101.07 was approved by the board at the June 19, 2007 meeting. And if you're looking at Muni Code, I don't know that you're going to find it. It appears that it's never made its way into the Muni Code book.
Yeah, looking at Muni Code, the only thing, 101.07 actually has been repealed and not replaced with anything. That's why I'm sitting here scratching my head.
I understand. I'm showing ordinance number.
Was that back when Commissioner Wheeler was chairman? Just curious.
I'm not going to point the finger, but.
Oh, no. Ordinance number 2007-022 was approved by the Board of County Commissioners, and the strike-through and underline version was in the agenda backups on page 241 and 242 of the June 19th, 2007 meeting, and that was the motion approved. And then for whatever reason, it didn't.
Oh, boy, it should not, yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
That's the document.
Commissioner Ryan. I understand where Commissioner Wheeler is trying to go, but looking back over the last 6, 8, 9 months, I agree completely with Commissioner Davis and yourself. When your assistant left, I think we all sat down with our assistants and said, hey, everybody needs to step up a little bit and make the office work. And I think the girls did an absolutely fantastic job doing that. I don't think during your chairmanship that a single thing has been missed or dropped or not taken care of. But I would feel very short if we reduced down to 3 staff in that position. I just think somebody goes on vacation or somebody's sick, we're just not there. And I think having 4 assistants, they work very well rotating at the front desk. They can answer the phone, but at the same time they can get on their computer, they can do their minutes, they can do other work. So they're very productive instead of just answering a phone. So I think we're better off with 4 full-time assistants, and they let them divide up the workload as they have the last 6, 8 months. Whether you hire one for District 5 or Commissioner Flesher hires one for District 2, I don't really care. You guys can flip a coin or whatever you want to do on that. But I like how we were, a month ago with the 4 aides. I thought the office worked very smoothly, and I think, like you said, we all pitched in and they all did the work, and it worked well.
Yeah, I'd like to note 2 things. One is, in our budget this year, which is the BCC operations budgets, we have a contingency line which was put in there in case I saw some breakdown in the way it worked. Because I'd know that even if it was breaking down, I wouldn't need more than a part-time personal assistant, and so that money is in the budget. But again, I agree with Commissioner Wheeler that if we can't do with only 3 commissioner assistants today, then maybe we ought to work to shrink government even further so we can. However, that's more a philosophically driven choice than it is the position of all 5 county commissioners. And I will stand by the belief that the only way it could work with 3 assistants is if we all agree that that's the direction we want to drive towards, and if we're all incredibly cooperative. And just based on this discussion, I'm led to the fact that if this is something that's imposed on us, it will not work. and it will break down, and it'll be a bigger mess, and we'll probably end up with 5 personal assistants again.
I agree.
So, absent a complete buy-in from not just us 5, but the 3 personal assistants that are up there, I wouldn't go forward with it, which is why I didn't second that motion. Okay, I think we're probably done with that portion of the discussion. I'll ask Commissioner Wheeler on the committees. I'm full in agreement with him, and if he wants to put in a motion that we see if we can drive the number of committees down by 1 further step, I'd be happy to second it.
I think we've still got some stuff coming forward on the, some of this, I don't know that would affect the objective of the committees, that we've been working on for a while. But yeah, I think annually we should readdress and look at and find out if there's committees that we can reduce or, because that does take a lot of staff time in doing the minutes. And we've talked about that in the past also.
Do you want to add a little specificity to the motion?
For what, for instance?
On the committees, that just,
yeah, I'd like to go back and I think it's been about a year. I think it was last May. So I'd like to go back and reevaluate our committees again.
The existing committees?
The existing committees.
Okay.
We got to be careful because we did that 1 year and added a committee.
Two of them. We definitely don't want to add anything, allow any clawback. But I'll also note that a lot of committees we now have are mandated by the state, which is why we didn't cut them last time. So there's a motion to review existing committees to see if we want to cut any further ones. I'll be happy to second that. Commissioner Flesher?
Mr. Chairman, doesn't it have to be publicly noticed?
Well, we're just basically directing staff to come back with something.
It's not a separate discussion than the original request?
I think we're fixing to take action on something that wasn't publicly noticed.
Well, in that case,
I believe that we need to.
But that's just me. I'm only one.
Council? That's fine. Well, I didn't realize we were taking any action, but rather directing staff to get the staff report that we could take action. But I'll be happy if Commissioner Wheeler can wait a week to put it under next week's to come back then.
Yeah, I know that's something we never do here. So I'd like to
I just want to keep us all happy. I'm not concerned with consistency today.
I can't recall the last time we made votes on public speaking items, but there happened today as well.
We've done that regularly, despite my prior efforts.
Yes, you've tried.
Yeah, I can't recall back what we were talking about with the ordinance. I mean, Mr. Plakovich, does that need to be codified in an ordinance, or how would?
No, let me come back to that.
Okay.
A couple of things. Number one, it just strikes me that staffing in your office is a poor topic to deal with in an ordinance,
yes,
as opposed to just by decision.
Yeah.
Number two, the ordinance as it currently exists, the one that you read, Jim, was what was proposed to the board on 241, 242. The minutes reflect that piece about the commissioner's assistants and the receptionist was deleted. And I do happen to have a certified copy of the adopted ordinance, which leaves 101.07 vacant, which is why it is vacant in Municode, apparently. But the bottom line is, your existing ordinance, the only thing it says with respect to commissioner assistants is essentially under board employee relations, where it basically says that the board shall not get involved in employee issues. It has a phrase in there, an exception that applies with regard to supervision of their commissioner assistants in accordance with personnel rules of the county. So that doesn't actually mandate any specific number of commissioner assistants. So I think that's still something that's open to you. So number one, I don't think you're out of sync with your existing ordinance.
Okay.
And I think you can adjust that number as you see fit.
I think we've talked around in circles on this one.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we have a motion on the floor about revisiting committees that was made by Commissioner Wheeler, seconded by myself, but we have some discussion of whether it's something that we should properly be taking action on this time. Given that I don't think it's anything that commits the commission to anything, I really don't think it's, basically we're just having an open discussion to see whether we want to give staff direction to come back with something, so we're not really making any decisions. So based on that, based on
staff report.
Exactly. So I think Commissioner Davis, you're overworking us today. So thinking it through that way, I'm going to go ahead and call the item and ask for a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen.
I'm going to call Jackie.
What was the vote?
The motion was simply to revisit existing committees and to see if there are any others that we don't need.
Or we can clean up.
Okay.
Either clean up in terms of reducing the number of committees or reducing any unnecessary times when they're met.
Okay.
And there's no real hurry right now. I think if you aim for a September time period, that's probably great.
Yeah, that's usually like going to the dentist when we handle these committees.
Last time, though, it worked well, so remember that. We may have another good chance. We're going to go
Trying
on.
to make these meetings as interesting as the city.
We're going to go on to special districts right now, solid waste.
Chairman, move
disposal
approval of
districts.
the minutes of the June 14,
Second.
2011.
Motion to
solid waste
approve the
disposal
minutes from
district.
Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by Commissioner Wheeler. All in favor? Aye. Passes 5-0. Next up, amendment number 3 to work order number 9 to Cap Dresser and McKee for engineering services related to the new Oslo Customer Service Convenience Center.
Approval. Second.
We have a motion to approve from Commissioner Fleischer, a second from Commissioner Davis. Any discussion? Good afternoon, Himanshu. Goodbye, Himanshu.
Thanks,
All in favor?
presentation.
Aye.
Aye.
Any against? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Sorry to keep you waiting, gentlemen from Camp Dresser, but...
Mr. Chairman, do you just want to make a reminder notice about our budget workshop tomorrow morning?
I absolutely do. Some of the most exciting things the county commission ever does during the year will take place in these chambers tomorrow, beginning at 9 o'clock. I believe 9 o'clock in the morning, and we are going to review our budget and hopefully approve large portions of it. We hope that everybody comes. Yeah, it's a workshop. Final approval. Yeah, the final approval will be in September, but these are the workshops which have a real impact on how the budget's shaped up. Thank you, and good night.
Talk about Sam.